While I was finalizing a multi-million-dollar merger in a glass tower in London, my sister was back in Chicago trying to force her way into my penthouse. Her text was blunt. "Give me the code, or I'll break the lock. Don't pretend you don't see this." My parents called it betrayal, said I'd set a trap for my own blood. I didn't argue. I calmly stirred my Earl Grey and opened the security app. Because what my sister didn't know, what she realized far too late, was that I'd moved out 2 weeks earlier. And the man she was screaming at behind that door wasn't me. Thanks for being here. Comment where you're watching from, and let's get into what really happened behind that door. Note: this story includes dramatized elements for educational and storytelling purposes. My name is Jasmine, and at 35 years old, I thought I had finally put an ocean between me and my family toxic expectations. As the chief financial officer for a global logistics firm, I built a life of precision, order, and silence. But as I sat in the glass-walled conference room of the Shard, looking out over the grey London skyline, the phone in my pocket would not stop vibrating. It was not a client. It was my mother, Viola. 15 missed calls in 10 minutes, followed by a string of texts from my younger sister, Chloe. Before I tell you exactly what happened when that apartment door opened, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. And if you have ever been the family scapegoat who was expected to fund everyone else, lifestyle, hit that like and subscribe button. You are definitely not alone. I apologized to the board of directors, smoothing my blazer as I stepped out into the hallway. My phone screen was lighting up with a notification from my home security app. Motion detected. Front door. Smart lock tampered. I opened the live feed. The image was crisp, displaying the hallway of the luxury high-rise building I used to call home. And there they were. My sister Chloe, dressed in a faux fur coat that looked ridiculous for a Tuesday afternoon, and her husband Tyler. Tyler was kneeling in front of the door. He was not knocking, he was not waiting. He was digging a thin metal tool into the keyhole of the $2,000 smart lock I had installed 3 years ago. "Hurry up, Tyler," Chloe hissed, her voice distorted but audible through the camera microphone. "She thinks she can just fly off to Europe and leave this place empty while we are sleeping on mom couch. It is selfish." Tyler grunted, twisting the tool. "You know how these people are, Chloe. They get a little money and they think they are better than everyone. They love making people like us wait." I felt the familiar heat rise up my neck. Tyler, my brother-in-law, a man who had failed the real estate licensing exam 3 times and currently claimed to be an investor. He had always made those little comments. Microaggressions wrapped in a smile. He loved the benefits of marrying into a successful Black family, but he hated that the success came from me, the woman who saw right through him, and not from his wife whom he could manipulate. I did not call my mother back. I knew exactly what she would say. She would tell me that I was being unreasonable. She would say that because I had a 3-bedroom penthouse and no husband or children, it was my duty to house Chloe and Tyler. She would remind me that Tyler was just going through a rough patch, and that as the older sister I should be honored to help. I tapped the microphone button on my screen. My voice projected from the doorbell speaker in Chicago, thousands of miles away. "Get away from the door, Chloe." On the screen, Chloe jumped. She looked around wildly before realizing the voice was coming from the panel. "Jasmine!" she screamed, stepping closer to the camera until her face filled the frame. "Open this door right now. I know you can unlock it remotely." "Stop playing games." "I am not playing games," I said, keeping my voice low so the executives in the conference room would not hear. "I am in London, and you are attempting to break and enter." "It is not breaking and enter if it is family," Chloe scoffed. "Mom said we could stay here until Tyler business deal comes through. You are barely ever here anyway. Don't be such a greedy witch." I watched Tyler pause his work on the lock. He looked up at the camera, a smirk playing on his lips. "Come on, Jasmine. Don't make a scene. We just need a place to crash for a few months. Unless you want me to tell your building management that you are abandoning your property. That might violate your lease terms. He thought he was being clever. He thought he had leverage. I took a deep breath. For years I had paid their debts. I had paid for Chloe's wedding. I had bailed Tyler out of his car payments. I had let them stay in my previous condo rent-free for a year only to find the walls damaged and the carpets ruined when they finally left. But this time was different. I checked the timestamp on the video feed. It was 2 in the afternoon in Chicago. Chloe listened to me very carefully. I said, my thumb hovering over the screenshot button. I do not live there anymore. My lease ended 2 weeks ago. I handed over the keys. If you open that door, I cannot help you. Chloe laughed. It was a harsh, ugly sound. You are such a liar. I saw your Instagram. You posted a photo of the view last week. You are just trying to hoard it. You always do this. You think you are better than us because you have a fancy job and we are just struggling artists. She turned to Tyler. Break it, Ty. She is bluffing. I watched Tyler pull out a more aggressive-looking tool from his kit. He was actually going to destroy the lock. I quickly typed a text message to Chloe, ensuring there was a paper trail. Do not enter that apartment. I have vacated the premises. The current resident is not me. If you proceed, you are committing a felony. I saw the notification pop up on her phone screen in the video feed. She glanced at it, rolled her eyes, and shoved the phone back into her pocket. He almost got it, babe, Tyler muttered. My phone vibrated again. It was my mother leaving a voicemail. I transcribed it instantly. The text read, Jasmine, stop being spiteful. Let your sister in. Tyler is a sensitive man. He creates opportunities. He does not need to be standing in a hallway like a commoner. If you do not open that door, do not bother coming to Thanksgiving. I looked at the gray London sky. I thought about the Thanksgiving dinners, where I was made to sit at the kids' table because I was unmarried, while Tyler sat at the head of the table carving the turkey I had paid for. I thought about the years of being called the cold one, the sellout, the one who acted white because I prioritized my credit score over their chaotic whims. I realized then that I did not care about Thanksgiving. I typed one last message to the building management forwarding them the live feed, but I did not hit send yet. I wanted to see it happen. I wanted to see the moment reality crashed into their delusion. Click. The sound was sharp and final. On the video feed, the heavy oak door swung inward. We are in, Tyler announced, kicking the door wider with his boot. He stepped into the foyer, not wiping his feet. Chloe turned back to the camera one last time, giving the lens the middle finger. Thanks for nothing, sister. We will make ourselves at home. Maybe I will borrow that Chanel bag you never use. They disappeared into the apartment. I stood there in the hallway of the Shard, gripping my phone. My heart was pounding, not with fear, but with a strange, dark anticipation. They had ignored my warning. They had ignored the law. They had broken into a property that now belonged to the U.S. Marshals Service, specifically assigned to a high-ranking officer currently in witness protection coordination. I took a sip of my cooling tea. I did not call the police. I did not call my mother back. I simply kept the camera app open and switched the view to the interior camera in the living room, which I still had temporary access to until the system fully reset at midnight. Tyler was already heading for the liquor cabinet. Chloe was dropping her bags on the pristine marble floor. They had no idea that the man sleeping in the master bedroom worked the night shift, and he slept with a Sig Sauer P226 under his pillow. The show was just beginning. The heavy oak door groaned as it gave way, swinging inward, to reveal the foyer of the penthouse. On my phone screen, I watched the unauthorized entry unfold in high definition. It felt like watching a slow-motion car crash. Chloe stepped inside first, her heels clicking loudly against the imported Italian marble floors. She did not look like someone who had just committed a felony. She looked like a queen returning to her castle after a long exile. She threw her arms wide, spinning in a circle, her faux fur coat flaring out around her. Finally, she shouted, her voice echoing in the empty hallway. God, she makes everything so difficult. Tyler followed her in dragging a scuffed leather suitcase that left a faint trail of mud on the pristine white tiles. He did not bother to wipe his boots. He looked around with a critical sneer, assessing the space, not with gratitude, but with the calculating eyes of a man wondering how much he could pawn the fixtures for. About time, Tyler muttered, kicking the door shut behind him with his heel. The lock mechanism clicked, sealing them inside. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. They were inside. They had officially crossed the line from annoying family drama to criminal trespassing. But before I could even process the legal ramifications, my phone buzzed again. It was my mother, Viola. I stared at her name on the screen. Part of me wanted to ignore it to let the police handle the explanation later. But I needed to hear it. I needed to know exactly where she stood. I swiped the green icon and held the phone to my ear, my eyes never leaving the security feed where my sister was now aggressively opening my mail that had been left on the console table. Jasmine, my mother's voice barked before I could even say hello. It was not a greeting. It was an accusation. I am here, Mother, I said, keeping my voice steady, though my hand was trembling slightly. It is about time you answered, she snapped. Her tone was sharp, the same tone she used when I was a child, and had forgotten to thaw the chicken for dinner. I just got off the phone with Chloe. She was frantic. She said the codes were changed. She said you were ignoring her. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that is? To have your sister standing in a hallway like a beggar? I watched on the screen as Tyler walked over to the smart thermostat and cranked it up, then immediately walked into the living room and threw his muddy jacket onto the beige sofa. Mom, I said, trying to cut through her tirade. I told Chloe not to go there. I told you. That apartment is not mine anymore. Oh, stop it, Viola hissed. Stop lying, Jasmine. Just stop it. I know you. I know exactly what you are doing. You are trying to punish her. You are trying to make a point because you think you are better than everyone else now that you are some big executive in London. I am not trying to make a point, I said, my voice rising slightly. I am trying to tell you the truth. My lease ended. I moved out. You are lying, she repeated, her voice dripping with venom. You just do not want to share. You have always been like this, stingy, cold. Chloe needs this, Jasmine. Tyler needs this. And then she said the words that made the breath catch in my throat. The words that peeled back the layers of our family dynamic and showed the rotten core underneath. Tyler is a white man, Jasmine, she said, lowering her voice as if sharing a sacred truth. He comes from a certain background. He is used to a certain standard of living. He cannot be bouncing around cheap motels or sleeping on my couch forever. It is demeaning for a man like him. You know how hard it is for him to find his footing in this economy. You have plenty. You have more than you need. Why do you have to make him suffer? Why do you have to embarrass the family by treating him like he is less than I, stood frozen in the corridor of the London office building? The absurdity of it washed over me. My mother, a black woman who had marched in protests in the 70s, was now berating me for not subsidizing the lifestyle of a mediocre white man who refused to work a steady job. It was not just about money. It was about proximity to whiteness. In her eyes, Tyler was a prize, a status symbol, even if he was broke and lazy. His comfort mattered more than my safety. His ego mattered more than my hard-earned property. I closed my eyes, and for a second I was 17 again. I was sitting at the kitchen table staring at my acceptance letter to Howard University while my mother explained why there was no money for my tuition. We just bought Chloe the convertible, she had said, not even looking up from her magazine. You know she needs a car to get to cheerleading practice. You are smart, Jasmine. You can work. You are strong. Chloe is delicate. That was the narrative. I was the strong one, the workhorse, the mule. Chloe was the delicate flower, the golden child who needed to be protected and adorned. I had worked 2 jobs at the library and the cafeteria to pay my way through school, graduating with honors and 0 help. Chloe had dropped out of 3 different community colleges, each time with a new excuse and a new bailout from our parents. And now here we were again. But this time, the stakes were not a used car or tuition money. "Mom," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. "Listen to me. I am recording this call." "What?" she sputtered. "I am recording this call," I repeated. "And I want you to say it again. I want you to go on the record saying that you instructed Chloe and Tyler to break into a property that I told you I do not own." "Don't you dare threaten me," Viola screamed. "You ungrateful little brat. After everything we did for you, we put a roof over your head. We raised you. And this is how you repay us, by throwing legal terms in your mother's face. You are sick, Jasmine. You are sick and you are selfish. If you do not give them the Wi-Fi password and apologize to Tyler for this mess, do not bother coming home for Christmas. Do not bother calling me on my birthday. You are dead to us until you fix this." She hung up. The line went dead. I lowered the phone from my ear. The silence in the London hallway was deafening. My heart was pounding against my ribs, a mixture of adrenaline and old deep grief. The grief of realizing that no matter how high I climbed, no matter how much I achieved, I would never be enough for them. I would never be worth protecting. I looked back at the phone screen. In the apartment, Chloe had found the wine fridge. It was stocked with bottles that belonged to the new tenant. She pulled out a bottle of Pinot Noir, laughing as she showed it to Tyler. They were celebrating. They thought they had won. They thought they had successfully bullied me into submission one more time. They had no idea. I looked at the recording of the call with my mother. It was saved. It was evidence. Evidence that I had tried to stop them. Evidence that they were acting with malicious intent. Evidence that my mother had explicitly encouraged a crime. I could have called the building manager right then. I could have called the police and told them it was a misunderstanding, tried to get them out before the real tenant came home. I could have saved them one last time. But then I looked at Tyler's face on the screen. He was mocking a piece of African art on the wall, a mask that I knew belonged to the new tenant. He poked it, laughed, and then wiped his hands on his jeans. "He needs a certain standard of living," my mother had said. "Okay, Mom," I whispered to the empty air. "You want him to have a high standard of living? You want him to be treated like a VIP?" I tapped the screen, switching the view to the camera in the master bedroom. It was dark, the blackout curtains drawn, but I could see the outline of a tactical vest hanging on the back of the chair. I could see the glint of the badge on the nightstand. "I am done saving you," I thought. I opened my email and drafted a message to my lawyer, attaching the video of the break-in and the audio file of my mother call. Subject line: unauthorized entry and family harassment. Then I sat down on the bench in the hallway and watched the screen. I did not feel guilty. I did not feel sad. For the first time in 35 years, I felt a cold, hard sense of freedom. "Welcome to your new life, Chloe," I whispered. "Welcome to hell." Inside the apartment, the sound of glass shattering came through the speaker. Chloe had dropped a wine glass. She giggled, unbothered. "Oops," she said. "Jasmine can buy another one." I watched as she kicked the shards of glass under the rug. The same rug that would be swarming with federal agents in less than an hour. I took a sip of my cold tea and waited. The trap was set, and they had walked right into it, smiling. The silence of the penthouse, which I had curated for 3 years to be a sanctuary of peace, was now being desecrated by the shrill voice of my sister. I sat in the London corridor, my eyes glued to the small screen of my phone, watching a masterclass in delusion. Chloe had barely been inside for 5 minutes before she pulled out her phone. She did not check the security system or look for a guest manual. Instead, she walked straight to the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the Chicago skyline and found the perfect lighting. I watched as she adjusted her hair, fluffing the faux fur collar of her coat to make it look more expensive than it was. She tapped her screen, swiping through filters, until she found one that smoothed out her skin and made the gloomy Chicago afternoon look like a golden hour photo shoot. Then she hit record. "Hey everyone!" Chloe chirped, her voice pitching up an octave into that fake influencer tone that made my teeth ache. "So I have a little surprise for you all. I know I have been quiet lately, but that is because I have been so busy moving. Welcome to my new temporary crib." She panned the camera around the living room, capturing the sleek Italian leather sofas, the abstract art on the walls, and the expansive view of Lake Michigan. My big sister Jasmine had to rush off to London for some boring business thing. She continued lying with an ease that was honestly terrifying. She literally begged me and Tyler to come stay here and watch the place. She was like, "Chloe, I cannot trust anyone else with my baby." So here we are, just doing my sisterly duty. It is a tough job, but someone has to live in luxury, right? I let out a dry, humorless laugh in the empty hallway. Begged her. I had threatened her with legal action and she turned it into a favor. She was rewriting reality in real time, broadcasting a fabrication to her 3,000 followers. She was staking a claim, publicly marking her territory on a property that did not belong to either of us. I quickly tapped the screen to screen record her Instagram story. That was the thing about narcissists. They always provided the evidence against themselves. She was documenting her own trespassing. Every view, every comment was just another witness for the prosecution I was mentally assembling. While Chloe was busy engaging with her digital audience, answering questions about the square footage she did not know and the rent she did not pay, Tyler was making himself at home in the kitchen. I switched the camera feed to the kitchen angle. Tyler was prowling around the island, opening cabinets and slamming them shut. He looked agitated, his earlier bravado fading slightly now that he was not performing for Chloe. He was looking for something specific. He found the liquor cabinet above the wet bar. I saw his eyes widen. The new tenant, whoever he was, clearly had a taste for the finer things in life, specifically rare spirits. Tyler reached up and pulled down a heavy, dust-covered bottle. I zoomed in on the feed. It was a bottle of Pappy Van Winkle Family Reserve, the 23-year-old bourbon, a bottle that cost more than Tyler's first car. It was unopened, the wax seal pristine. Tyler whistled low. He turned the bottle over in his hands, admiring the amber liquid. "Chloe, check this out," he shouted across the room, interrupting her live stream. "Your sister has been holding out on us." Chloe wandered into the kitchen, phone still held high, live stream still running. She pointed her camera at Tyler. "Look at hubby making drinks," she narrated. "What did you find, babe?" Tyler held up the bottle, grinning like a schoolboy who had just found the key to the candy store. "Top shelf stuff," he said, tapping the glass. "I did not know Jasmine had it in her. This is serious whiskey. A bit manly for her taste, do not you think? I mean, usually she is drinking that cheap wine or whatever. I guess she keeps this around for when she tries to impress her bosses." He laughed, a condescending sound that grated on my nerves. A bit manly. Even when he was stealing from me, or what he thought was me, he had to insert a jab about my femininity. He had to remind himself that even though I earned 10 times what he did, I was still just a woman who probably bought the wrong drink by mistake. "Open it up," Chloe said, eager to show off the lifestyle she felt entitled to. "Let is toast to the new house." Tyler did not hesitate. He did not look for a corkscrew or try to open it carefully. He grabbed a serrated steak knife from the counter and hacked at the wax seal, chipping it away in messy chunks that fell onto the polished granite counter. He twisted the cork roughly, and I winced as I watched him pour a generous, sloppy measure into 2 dirty water glasses he had pulled from the sink. He did not let the bourbon breathe. He did not appreciate the craftsmanship. He just knocked back a sip that was worth $50 and grimaced. Strong, he wheezed, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "But good. Tastes like money." Chloe took a sip and wrinkled her nose. "Ew, it burns. But it looks cute in the glass. Cheers to us." They clinked the dirty glasses together. "Cheers to us. Cheers to breaking and entering. Cheers to drinking a stranger $3,000 bourbon." But the alcohol was not enough. Once the initial thrill of the toast wore off, the real agenda surfaced. I watched as they set the glasses down and began the hunt. This was the part I had dreaded, the violation that went beyond physical presence. "So where does she keep it?" Tyler asked, leaning against the counter. "Keep what?" Chloe asked, checking her reflection in the microwave door. "The emergency cash," Tyler said, his voice dropping. "You know she has it. Everyone with this kind of money keeps a stash. A safe, a shoebox, something. She is in London, Chloe. She is not going to notice a few hundred missing bills. We need gas money for the week, and I need to get my laptop fixed if I'm going to close that deal." Chloe hesitated for a fraction of a second, looking at the camera she had finally put down. But the hesitation was not moral. It was strategic. "She usually keeps a lockbox in the office," Chloe said. "Or the master bedroom closet. She thinks she is slick, hiding it in her shoeboxes." "Check the office," Tyler commanded, taking another swig of the bourbon. "I will check the bedroom." I watched them split up. Tyler headed for the master suite and Chloe marched toward the home office. My stomach turned. It was not my money they were looking for. I had cleared everything out. My accounts were digital. My valuables were in a vault at the bank, and my personal items were in storage, or with me in London. But the violations stung just the same. They felt entitled to my labor. They felt that my hard work was a communal resource that they could mine whenever they hit a rough patch, which was always. I switched the feed to the master bedroom. Tyler was pulling open the drawers of the nightstand. He shoved aside a stack of tactical magazines and a box of ammunition, not even pausing to wonder why a corporate CFO would be reading about ballistics. His greed had blinded him to the danger signs. He moved to the dresser, yanking open the drawers so hard the wood creaked. He rifled through the neat stacks of black t-shirts and gray socks. "Nothing," he muttered, throwing a pair of socks onto the floor. "Where are the jewelry boxes? Where are the watches?" He turned to the closet. He pushed aside the hanging garment bags, looking for a safe. When he did not find one immediately, he kicked the wall in frustration, leaving a black scuff mark on the white paint. "Cheap," he spat out. "She is so cheap. All this money and she probably keeps it in the bank like a sucker." Meanwhile, in the office, Chloe was having a similar meltdown. She was pulling books off the shelves, shaking them to see if money fell out. She opened the desk drawers, dumping pens and paper clips onto the floor. She found a leather-bound notebook and flipped through it. It was blank. She tossed it aside, bored. "Jasmine," she yelled out to the empty apartment, "you are so boring. Who does not keep cash in the house?" She sat down in the leather executive chair, spinning around in circles. Then her eyes landed on the bottom drawer of the desk. It was locked. "Tyler," she screamed. "Tyler, get in here! I found a locked drawer." I watched Tyler jog into the room, abandoning his search in the bedroom. He looked at the locked drawer with predatory excitement. "This is it," he said, rubbing his hands together. "This is where the good stuff is." He did not look for a key. He went back to the kitchen and returned with a screwdriver from the utility drawer. I watched, helpless but mesmerized, as he wedged the screwdriver into the gap of the beautiful mahogany desk. He leveraged his weight against it. Wood splintered. The lock groaned. "Stop," I whispered in London. "Stop, you idiots." But they could not hear me. With a loud crack, the wood gave way and the drawer popped open. Tyler yanked it out, eager to count the spoils. But there was no cash inside. There were no diamonds. Instead, the drawer contained a single thick black folder, and sitting on top of the folder was a heavy matte black object that Tyler slowly reached for. It was a spare magazine for a semi-automatic pistol. Tyler picked it up, weighing it in his hand. He frowned. "Bullets?" he asked, confused. "Since when does Jasmine have a gun?" Chloe peered into the drawer. "Maybe she is dating a drug dealer," she giggled nervously. "That would explain the money." Tyler did not laugh. He reached into the drawer again and pulled out the black folder. It was stamped in silver letters. "Department of Justice, United States Marshals Service, classified." He stared at the cover. He blinked his brain, trying to reconcile the object in his hand with the narrative he had built about his sister-in-law. "What is this?" he muttered. "Open it," Chloe said, leaning over his shoulder. "Maybe it is her will. Maybe she left us something. Tyler flipped the folder open. I leaned closer to my phone screen. I knew what was in there. Or at least I could guess. Tyler's face went pale. He was looking at a photograph clipped to the first page. It was a mugshot. A very serious, very dangerous-looking mugshot of a man with a tattoo on his neck. And underneath a list of known associates and last known locations. "This isn't Jasmine's stuff," Tyler whispered. "Well, whose is it?" Chloe asked, grabbing the folder from him. She scanned the page. Then she looked at the desk. Then she looked at the room around her. "I don't know," Tyler said, his voice trembling slightly. "But whoever lives here, they are not a logistic manager." And just like that, the party was over. The atmosphere in the room shifted from celebratory to unsettled. But their greed was still stronger than their fear. They did not leave. They did not run. Instead, Tyler closed the folder and shoved it back into the broken drawer. "Forget it," he said, his voice tight. "Probably just some work stuff she is doing. Maybe she is auditing a security firm." "Yeah, that is it. She is just an accountant, Chloe. Don't let it spook you." He was rationalizing. He was desperate to stay in the luxury. He refused to believe that he had just broken into the lair of a predator. I watched them exchange uneasy glances, then return to the bottle of whiskey. They poured another drink, trying to wash away the unease. "Drink up," Tyler said, raising his glass again. "We are not going anywhere." I saved the video file. The evidence of the break and the vandalism of the desk and the theft of the alcohol was all secure. "Enjoy the drink, Tyler," I thought. "It is going to be the most expensive shot of whiskey you ever had." Because the elevator indicator on my security app just lit up. Someone was coming up to the penthouse, and he was not bringing housewarming gifts. The master bedroom of the penthouse had always been my sanctuary, a space designed with soft creams, plush velvet, and the scent of fresh lavender. But as I watched Chloe push open the double doors on my phone screen, I knew she was walking into a very different kind of room. The new tenant, the man I knew only as Mr. Vance, was a minimalist. The plush rugs were gone. The silk drapes had been replaced with heavy light-blocking shades. The room looked less like a home and more like a tactical command center that happened to have a bed in it. Chloe, however, was too blinded by her own greed to notice the shift in atmosphere. She marched straight toward the walk-in closet, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. I knew exactly what she was looking for. She wanted my vintage Hermes scarves. She wanted the limited edition pumps I had bought in Milan. She wanted to drape herself in my success and post a photo with a caption about treating herself. "Jackpot," she whispered, grabbing the handle of the closet door. She threw it open, ready to raid. Her smile dropped instantly. The cavernous closet, which used to hold $50,000 worth of designer apparel, was starkly efficient. There were no floral prints, no silk blouses, no red-bottom shoes. Instead, hanging on the rack with military precision, were 5 identical black suits. Next to them were 10 crisp white button-down shirts starched so stiffly they looked like they could stand up on their own. On the floor, perfectly aligned, were 3 pairs of black combat boots and 2 pairs of polished dress shoes. Chloe stood there, her mouth slightly open. She reached out and touched the sleeve of one of the suits. It was heavy wool, utilitarian, and tough. It was not the fabric of a fashion-forward CFO. It was the fabric of someone who might need to tackle a suspect in an alleyway. "What the hell?" Chloe muttered. She pushed the hangers aside, searching frantically for a hidden section. She checked the shelves. Nothing but neatly folded gray t-shirts and black socks. "Jasmine, seriously," she groaned. "Did you donate everything?" She spun around, scanning the room for anything of value. Her eyes landed on the bed. It was made with hospital corners, tight and disciplined. She dropped to her knees and peered underneath, hoping to find storage bins filled with the treasures she felt entitled to. She reached under the frame and her hand hit something hard. "Ooh, here we go," she said, her voice brightening. She dragged a heavy object out from the shadows. It was not a shoebox. It was a matte black metal case about the size of a briefcase but twice as thick. It had a heavy-duty padlock on the front, and no markings other than a serial number stenciled in white paint. Chloe sat back on her heels staring at it. She tried to lift the lid, but it was locked tight. She shook it. It did not rattle like jewelry. It made a solid, dense thud. "Tyler," she screamed. "Tyler, get in here!" I watched on the screen as Tyler sauntered into the bedroom. He was holding his glass of stolen whiskey in one hand and a half-eaten apple in the other. He looked around the sparse room and frowned. "Where is the TV?" he asked. "Who does not have a TV in the bedroom?" "Never mind that," Chloe said, pointing to the closet. "Look at this. Where are her clothes?" Tyler walked over to the closet and peered inside. He let out a short, mocking laugh. "Wow," he said. "Boring. Looks like she joined a cult. Or maybe she is trying to dress like a man to get that promotion. You know how she is. Always trying to prove she is tough." He took a sip of whiskey, slouching against the doorframe. Or he added, a nasty smirk spreading across his face. "Maybe our dear Jasmine has finally got herself a man. A live-in boyfriend." Chloe looked at the suits again. "You think—" "Yeah," Tyler said. "Probably some young guy she is supporting. A boy toy. That would explain the cheap suits. She is probably trying to mold him into a corporate robot like her. That is hilarious. Jasmine paying for company." I gripped my phone tighter in the London hallway. The insult was expected, but hearing them reduce the dangerous reality of Mr. Vance to a boy toy was almost laughable. If they only knew that the owner of those suits could dismantle Tyler with one hand while eating his breakfast, they might not be standing so casually in his personal space. "What is in the box?" Tyler asked, nodding at the metal case on the floor. "I don't know," Chloe said. "It is locked. It is heavy." Tyler nudged it with his foot. "Probably just tax papers. Or maybe keepsakes from her boring trips." "Leave it. We will find a hammer later if we get bored." He turned away, uninterested. His attention span was short, driven only by immediate gratification. He wandered over to the small writing desk in the corner of the room. This was where Mr. Vance reviewed his case files before heading out on assignment. I held my breath. Tyler set his whiskey glass down on the desk, leaving a wet ring on the dark wood. He picked up a thick manila folder that was sitting in the center of the desk. The red stamp on the cover was unmistakable even through the security camera feed. Classified. Underneath, in smaller bold letters, it read, USMS. Fugitive Apprehension Task Force. Do not remove. Tyler frowned, squinting at the text. He was drunk enough that the words were likely swimming, but sober enough to recognize that this did not look like a spreadsheet. Classified, he read aloud, stumbling over the syllables. "What is she doing? Working for the CIA now." He laughed at his own joke, expecting Chloe to join in. Chloe was still on the floor, trying to pick the lock of the metal box with a bobby pin. She did not look up. "She is just dramatic," Chloe said dismissively. "Remember when she put a non-disclosure agreement on the fridge when we stayed with her last time, just because she did not want us eating her meal prep? She probably stamped this herself to feel important." Tyler flipped the folder over in his hands. He ran his thumb over the seal. Curiosity flickered in his eyes. He started to lift the cover. My heart hammered against my ribs. If he opened that folder, he would see crime scene photos. He would see surveillance logs. He would realize without a shadow of a doubt that he was in the wrong house. But just as he was about to turn the page, the ice in his glass shifted with a clink. He looked at his drink. It was empty. "Ah, screw it," he muttered, tossing the folder back onto the desk. It landed askew, dangerously close to the edge. "Reading is for work days. I need a refill." He grabbed his glass and turned back toward the door. "Come on, babe," he called out to Chloe. "Leave the box. Let us go see if she has any frozen steaks to go with this bourbon." Chloe groaned, tossing the bobby pin onto the carpet. "Fine, but this bed is hard as a rock. I am sleeping in the guest room." They walked out of the master bedroom, leaving the lights on the closet door wide open and the classified folder teetering on the edge of the desk. I let out a long exhale. They had missed the signs. They had looked directly at the red flags, the combat boots, the locked weapon case, the federal documents, and decided to paint over them with their own narrative of my life. To them, I was just Jasmine, the boring workaholic. Jasmine the spinster, Jasmine the bank account. They could not conceive of a world where I had detached myself so completely that I had leased my home to a federal agent. Their arrogance was their blindfold. I switched the camera feed back to the living room. They were heading for the kitchen again, laughing about something Tyler had said. I checked the time. It was now 2:30 in the afternoon in Chicago. Mr. Vance usually finished his shift briefing around 3. He would be heading home soon. I looked at the classified folder one last time on the screen. Tyler had dismissed it as a prop. He had no idea that the man who owned that folder was not an actor in a play. He was the director of the scene that was about to unfold, and Tyler had just cast himself as the villain. I sent a quick text to my lawyer. They are in the master bedroom. They have tampered with a locked storage container and handled sensitive documents. Please add potential compromise of federal information to the list of complaints. Then I sat back and waited for the elevator doors to open. The red flags were waving violently now, but my sister and her husband were too busy pouring another drink to see the storm coming. I watched the catastrophe unfold on the screen with a sense of detached horror. It was the kind of slow-motion disaster that you know is coming but are powerless to stop. Tyler was standing in the center of the living room, swaying slightly, the heavy crystal tumbler of bourbon in one hand and the bottle in the other. He was pontificating about something, gesturing wildly as he explained to Chloe why his last 3 business ventures had failed. It was never his fault, of course. It was the market. It was the investors. It was the bad luck that seemed to follow him like a cloud. And then gravity took over. As he swung his arm wide to emphasize a point about cryptocurrency, the heavy glass slipped from his fingers. It did not shatter immediately. It hit the edge of the coffee table, tipped over, and sent a dark crimson wave of 23-year-old bourbon and red wine he had poured earlier cascading onto the floor. My breath hitched. The liquid did not land on hardwood or tile. It landed directly in the center of the cream-colored Persian rug that anchored the room. This was not just any rug. When I had handed the keys over to the new tenant, Mr. Vance, I had admired that rug. It was a Tabriz hand-knotted silk and wool, likely worth more than Tyler's entire wardrobe combined. It was the kind of piece you walked around, not on. And now it was soaking up a dark, spreading stain that looked like a gunshot wound in the fabric. "Oops," Tyler said, looking down at the mess with glazed eyes. Chloe shrieked. "Tyler, that is disgusting. It is going to smell like a distillery in here." She did not care about the value of the rug. She did not care that they had just destroyed property that did not belong to them. She only cared that the aesthetic of her temporary palace was being ruined. "Relax," Tyler slurred. "It is just a rug. I will clean it up." I watched, praying he would run to the kitchen for paper towels. I prayed he would use water. I prayed for a moment of common sense. But Tyler was a man who believed the world existed to serve him. He looked around, realized the kitchen was too far, and his eyes darted back toward the hallway leading to the master bedroom. "I will be right back," he announced. He disappeared from the living room feed. A few seconds later, I saw him on the bedroom camera. He marched into the walk-in closet, the one filled with the stark, identical black suits. "No," I whispered in the silence of the London office. "Don't you dare." Tyler grabbed one of the black suit jackets off the hanger. He yanked it down so hard the plastic hanger snapped. He bunched the fabric in his hands, testing its thickness. "This will work," he muttered. He walked back into the living room holding the jacket of a high-ranking U.S. Marshal like it was a dirty dish rag. I watched in disbelief as he dropped the jacket onto the spreading wine and bourbon stain. He used his foot to stomp on it, grinding the expensive wool into the expensive silk, smearing the liquid deeper into the fibers of both. "Tyler." Chloe laughed, half shocked, half amused. "That is Jasmine's suit, or her boyfriend's suit." "Who cares?" Tyler said, twisting his foot to scrub the floor. "Look at it. It is cheap material, probably polyester. She can buy a new one. She makes millions, Chloe. She barely spends a dime on us. Consider this her contribution to the cleaning fee. He kicked the sodden, ruined jacket aside. It lay in a heap soaked in alcohol and stained purple. The rug underneath was destroyed, the stain now set permanently into the fibers. I felt a cold rage settle in my chest. It was not just the destruction. It was the attitude. The casual, arrogant assumption that my money was an endless resource that existed to absorb their mistakes. They believed that because I had succeeded, I owed them. They believed that my property was forfeit because they had less. It was the toxic logic of family members who refused to grow up. Just buy a new one. That was their solution to everything. Crash the car. Jasmine will buy a new one. Lose the rent money. Gambling, Jasmine will cover it. Destroy a stranger home, Jasmine will fix it. But I was not going to fix this. My phone buzzed with a new notification. This time it was not the camera. It was the Honeywell smart home system. Alert sudden temperature drop. HVAC system under strain. I opened the environmental controls app. The interior temperature of the penthouse was plummeting. They had cranked the air conditioning down to 60 degrees Fahrenheit. In Chicago, in late October. I switched the camera angle to the living room windows. Chloe was standing there pushing the sliding glass doors wide open. The wind from Lake Michigan was whipping into the apartment, billowing the curtains. "Why are the windows open?" Tyler asked, shivering as he sat back down on the sofa. "It smells like booze and old shoes in here," Chloe complained. "We need to air it out before the party starts." Party. I froze. "Yeah, well, keep the AC on," Tyler said. "I hate sweating. It feels fresh, like we are in the Alps." I stared at the data on my phone. They were running the industrial-grade air conditioning at full blast while leaving the entire wall of windows open to the autumn chill. They were literally trying to cool down the entire city of Chicago. The energy usage graph was spiking vertically. It was a small thing compared to the rug, but it was so symbolic. It was the ultimate disrespect. They were wasting resources simply because they did not have to pay the bill. They were bleeding the house dry energy unit by energy unit, just to be comfortable for a few hours. And then the word Tyler had said clicked. Party. I turned the volume up on the feed. Tyler was on his phone now, scrolling through his contacts. "Yo, Marcus," he was saying into the speakerphone. "Yeah, man, you gotta come see this place. Buckhead style in Chicago. No, for real. My sister-in-law place. She is out of town. It is ours for the weekend. Yeah, bring the crew. Bring the girls. We are ordering pizzas and wings. Just tell the doorman you are with Unit 4B. He hung up and looked at Chloe. "The boys are coming over," he said, grinning. "And maybe a few of your friends. We should break this place in properly." Chloe lit up. "Oh, I should invite the girls from the yoga studio. They never believe me when I say my family has money. This will show them." She started tapping furiously on her phone. I sat back against the cold glass wall of the London skyscraper. My head was spinning. They were not just squatting. They were inviting an audience. They were turning a federal agent safe house into a frat party. They were inviting strangers into a home that contained classified documents, weapons, and surveillance equipment. I checked the time. It was approaching 3 in the afternoon. If Tyler friends arrived before Mr. Vance came home, the situation would escalate from a trespassing charge to a potential riot. I thought about warning them. I thought about calling the doorman and having him block the guests. But then I looked at the ruined rug. I looked at the crumpled suit jacket in the corner. I looked at the condensation building on the open windows as the AC fought a losing battle against the outside air. No. Let them come. Let Marcus and the yoga girls come. Let them all be witnesses. Let them all be there when the reality of their choices walked through that front door. I wanted a full audience for what was about to happen. I opened the delivery app on my phone. I saw a notification that someone was trying to use my saved credit card to order $500 worth of sushi and champagne to the apartment address. Declined. I smiled thinly. Tyler phone pinged in the video feed. He frowned. "Card got declined," he muttered. Must be a fraud alert. Use yours, Chloe. Jasmine will reimburse us later. Chloe sighed but pulled out her card. Fine. But she better pay me back with interest. They had no idea that the only thing they would be getting paid in was handcuffs. I watched as they pushed the furniture back to create a dance floor. Tyler dragged the heavy oak coffee table across the floor, scratching the wood to make room for the DJ he claimed he was going to hire. They were building the stage for their own destruction. And they were doing it with such enthusiasm, such arrogant joy, that it was almost mesmerizing. The elevator light blinked again on my security interface. But it was not the guests. It was not the pizza delivery. The system logged a keycard entry at the lobby level. ID verified Special Deputy Marshal D. Vance. He was in the building. He was coming up. And upstairs, Tyler was currently using a coaster made of Italian leather to shim a wobbly leg on a chair he had just broken. I took a deep breath. The curtain was about to rise. The doorbell chimed a cheerful sound that echoed through the penthouse and into my headphones in London. I watched the video feed, half expecting to see the building security or perhaps a concerned neighbor. Instead, the foyer camera revealed a group of people who looked like they were ready for a music video shoot. It was the audience my sister had requested. There were two women carrying yoga mats and overpriced green juices, friends of Chloe whom I recognized from her Instagram. And behind them stood Marcus, Tyler's best friend, a man who still wore his college fraternity cap backward at the age of 34. He was carrying a 12-pack of cheap beer, which was an insult in itself considering they were about to drink whiskey worth more than his car. "Showtime," Tyler announced, throwing the door open wide. "Welcome to the crib, ladies and gentlemen," he shouted, gesturing grandly to the hallway I had paid for. "Come on in. Don't mind the mess on the rug, we had a little spill. But the view is worth $1,000,000. I watched as the group shuffled in. The yoga girls, Sarah and Jen, gasped as they saw the floor-to-ceiling windows. They immediately dropped their bags and rushed to the glass, pulling out their phones to take selfies before they even said hello to Chloe. "This is insane," Sarah squealed. "Chloe, you didn't tell us your sister was like rich. Chloe walked out of the kitchen flipping her hair. "Oh, you know me. I don't like to brag. But yeah, Jasmine does okay. She begs us to use the place so it doesn't feel empty." Marcus walked over to Tyler and fist bumped him. "Dude, you weren't kidding. This place is sick." "Where is the bar way ahead of you?" Tyler said, pointing to the open bottle of Pappy Van Winkle. "Help yourself, bro." I watched them settle in. They were like an invasive species spreading out over the furniture, putting their feet up on the velvet ottomans and laughing loudly at jokes that weren't funny. It was the ultimate violation of privacy. Strangers were not only in my home, or rather Mr. Vance's home, but they were being welcomed as if they belonged there. After a round of drinks, Tyler decided that the living room wasn't enough. He wanted to give the grand tour. He wanted to show off every inch of the dominion he had claimed. "Come check out the office," Tyler said, beckoning the group toward the hallway. "That is where the magic happens." He led them into the study. The room was dark, illuminated only by the streetlights from below and the blinking LED of the wireless router. Tyler walked over to the heavy mahogany desk. He sat down in the leather executive chair, spinning it around to face his friends. He looked ridiculous, like a child playing CEO. "So this is where she counts her money," Marcus joked, leaning against the doorframe. "Something like that," Tyler said. He placed his hands on the desk, looking for something to fiddle with. His eyes landed on the laptop sitting on the corner of the desk. I had seen this laptop before on previous feeds, but I had never looked at it closely. Now, through the high-definition camera zoomed in on Tyler's hands, I saw it clearly. It was not the sleek silver MacBook Air that I used. It was a beast of a machine. It was a Panasonic Toughbook, the kind used by military personnel in war zones. It was thick, encased in black rubberized armor with reinforced hinges and ports covered by protective flaps. It looked less like a computer and more like a weapon. "Whoa," Marcus said, nodding at the machine. "What kind of dinosaur computer is that? It looks like a brick." Tyler laughed. "Yeah. Jasmine is weird about technology. She thinks this industrial look makes her seem tough. Or maybe she is just too cheap to upgrade to the new models. Let's see what she is working on, Tyler said, reaching out to open the lid. I held my breath. Tyler lifted the heavy screen. The laptop did not wake up to a picture of a sunset or a generic wallpaper. Instead, a harsh red banner flashed across the screen. Warning: United States government property. Unauthorized access is a federal offense. Below the text, a camera lens embedded in the bezel flashed green, scanning for a face. A biometric prompt appeared on the screen: retinal scan required. Tyler blinked, surprised by the aggressive interface. Whoa, Sarah said, peering over his shoulder. That looks serious. Is your sister a spy or something? Tyler hesitated. For a second, I thought he might back down. The warning was clear. The hardware was intimidating. Any rational person would close the lid and walk away. But Tyler was not rational. He was performing for an audience, and he had already committed to the lie that this was his domain. Nah, Tyler scoffed, waving his hand dismissively. She is just paranoid. She works in finance, right? So she has all these security protocols for her bank stuff. It is all for show. She probably set this up just to keep people from seeing her browser history. He tapped the keyboard. A password prompt appeared demanding a 64-character alphanumeric key. You can't get in, man, Marcus said. That looks locked down tight. Tyler smirked. He looked at Marcus, then at the girls. He saw the doubt in their eyes, and his ego could not handle it. Please, Tyler said, leaning back in the chair. You forget who you are talking to. I used to work in IT, remember, before I got into real estate. I know how to bypass this junk. I sat in London and shook my head. Tyler had never worked in IT. He had worked at a chaotic call center for 3 weeks, selling extended warranties before getting fired for attendance. But in his mind, resetting a router qualified him as a hacker. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a keychain. Attached to it was a small silver USB drive. This, Tyler announced, holding up the drive like it was Excalibur as the master key. My stomach turned. I knew exactly what that USB drive was. A few years ago, when Tyler first started his fraudulent real estate investment scheme, he had paid a shady developer on the dark web to create a piece of software for him. It wasn't a hacking tool in the traditional sense, it was a data scraper. He used it to plug into the computers of small title companies or elderly clients to copy their contact lists and financial files while they weren't looking. It was a dirty, clumsy tool for a dirty, clumsy criminal. What are you doing? Chloe asked, finally stepping into the room. She had a glass of wine in her hand. I am going to open this bad boy up, Tyler said, his eyes gleaming with greed. If she has a hidden slush fund, or maybe an offshore account she hasn't told us about, it will be on this drive. We deserve to know, right? We are family. If she is hiding money while we are struggling, that is practically theft. Do it. Marcus egged him on. Let's see how the other half lives. Tyler located the USB port on the side of the rugged laptop. He had to pry open a rubber dust cover to get to it. Here we go, he whispered. He inserted the drive. I expected sparks. I expected an alarm to blare through the apartment, but nothing happened. The screen did not change. The red warning banner remained. See? Marcus laughed. I told you. It's bricked. Tyler frowned. He wiggled the drive. Give it a second. It is loading the payload. Suddenly, the screen of the laptop went black. The red warning text disappeared. The green light of the camera turned off. The machine appeared to die completely. Tyler tapped the keys. Nothing. He hit the power button. Nothing. You broke it, dude. Marcus laughed. I didn't break it, Tyler snapped, sweat starting to bead on his forehead. It is just rebooting. It is a security bypass. He was wrong, dead wrong. In that moment, inside the secure architecture of the Department of Justice network, a silent tripwire had been severed. The laptop had detected an unauthorized peripheral containing malicious code. It had immediately initiated a Protocol Zero lockdown. The hard drive was encrypting itself instantly. The location beacon was broadcasting a distress signal at the highest priority level. And at the U.S. Marshal's field office in downtown Chicago, a red light had just started flashing on the monitor of the cybersecurity response unit. They didn't just know someone was trying to log in, they knew someone was trying to inject malware into a federal database. Back in the apartment, Tyler pulled the USB drive out and threw it on the desk. "Piece of junk," he muttered, trying to save face. "Jasmine probably bought it at a surplus auction. It doesn't even work." He stood up, turning his back on the black screen. "Let's go back to the party," he said to the group, forcing a smile. "Who cares about spreadsheets anyway? Let's order that pizza." He ushered everyone out of the office, switching off the light. They walked away laughing, leaving the laptop sitting in the dark. But I saw it. On the video feed, a tiny, almost invisible white LED on the front edge of the laptop began to pulse. It was a slow, steady rhythm. Pulse, pulse, pulse. It was not a sleep light. It was a homing beacon. Tyler thought he had failed to hack a computer. He didn't realize he had just rang the doorbell of the federal government and then run away. And unlike an annoyed neighbor, the federal government does not just ignore a prank. They send a response team. I checked the time. It was now 3:15. Mr. Vance was already in the elevator. But now he wasn't just coming home to relax. He was coming home to a crime scene in progress. I almost felt sorry for Tyler. Almost. Because plugging a virus-laden USB into a U.S. Marshal's field computer was not just a mistake. It was an act of cyber warfare. And Tyler, with his fraternity cap and his stolen whiskey, was about to become a prisoner of war. The digital clock on my laptop screen in London read 2:14 in the morning, Chicago time. I had been watching the feed for hours, my eyes burning with fatigue, but I could not look away. The party inside the penthouse had devolved into a sloppy, chaotic mess. The music was still thumping, a repetitive bass line that rattled the expensive speakers, but the energy had shifted from celebratory to comatose. Marcus was passed out on the Italian leather ottoman, his mouth open, drooling onto the velvet. Sarah and Jen, the yoga instructors, were giggling in the kitchen, trying to make smoothies out of the expensive vodka and leftover pizza crusts. My sister Chloe was stumbling around the living room, holding a half-empty bottle of wine, swaying to the music. She looked like a queen surveying the ruins of a kingdom she did not own. The air conditioning was still blasting, fighting a losing war against the humidity coming through the open windows, making the apartment feel like a damp, refrigerated box. Then the light on the private elevator panel turned red. It was not the soft white glow of a guest arrival. It was a sharp, solid crimson. This was the indicator for a high-security clearance override. Someone was not just coming up. They were bypassing the lobby desk, bypassing the doorman, and bypassing the standard resident verification. I sat up straighter in my chair, my heart rate spiking. I knew who it was. The elevator doors did not ding. They slid open with a heavy pressurized hiss that cut through the noise of the music. A man stepped out. Dante Vance did not look like the kind of tenant my family would expect. He was not wearing a suit. He was not wearing designer loafers. He was dressed in a dark gray hoodie pulled up over a black tactical cap, dark jeans that looked durable enough to slide across asphalt, and heavy boots. He carried a nondescript duffel bag over one shoulder, but the way the strap dug into his muscles suggested it was filled with something far heavier than gym clothes. He stopped just inside the threshold of the foyer. He did not announce himself. He did not shout. He simply stood there perfectly still, scanning the room. I watched his head move with robotic precision, left to right. He took in the mud on the marble. He took in the sleeping stranger on the ottoman. He took in the spilled wine on the Persian rug. He took in the open windows. And then his eyes locked onto something that I could not see from the foyer camera angle, but I knew exactly what it was. He was looking toward the office. He was looking at the faint, pulsing light of the compromised laptop. His posture changed instantly. When he had stepped off the elevator, he looked like a man who was exhausted after a long shift, perhaps ready to grab a beer and sleep for 12 hours. But the moment he saw the state of the apartment, the exhaustion vanished. His shoulders squared. His hands came out of his pockets. He dropped the heavy duffel bag to the floor with a solid metallic thud that vibrated through the camera microphone. He was no longer a tenant coming home. He was an operator entering a hostile zone. Chloe was the first to notice him. She spun around during a clumsy dance move and nearly tripped over her own feet when she saw the dark figure standing by the door. "Hey!" she slurred, squinting her eyes. She did not scream in fear. She did not panic. Her entitlement was so deeply ingrained that her first instinct was not self-preservation, but indignation. She assumed in her drunken haze that this man was an intruder of the service variety, maybe a delivery driver who had stepped too far inside, or perhaps a maintenance worker coming to fix the air conditioning she had broken. "Who let you in?" she shouted, stumbling forward and pointing a manicured finger at his chest. Dante did not flinch. He did not even blink. He watched her approach with the cold, detached curiosity of a scientist observing a rat in a maze. "I said, who are you?" Chloe screeched, trying to find her balance. "The music is too loud, I can't hear you. Are you the pizza guy? We ordered that like an hour ago. You are late, and you can't just walk in here. This is a private residence." She turned her head, shouting over her shoulder. "Tyler! Tyler, get out here! The delivery guy is being creepy." Dante remained silent. He took one step forward, his boots making no sound on the floor. His eyes were not on Chloe anymore. He was scanning her waistline, checking for weapons. He was scanning the corners of the room, counting the hostiles. One female intoxicated. One male unconscious on the couch. Two females in the kitchen, low threat. And then Tyler emerged from the hallway. He was shirtless, wearing only his jeans, holding a fresh glass of whiskey. He looked disheveled and aggressive, filled with the liquid courage of the bourbon he had stolen. "Yo, what is the problem?" Tyler bellowed, puffing out his chest as he saw Dante. He sized Dante up and made a fatal miscalculation. He saw the hoodie and the jeans. He saw a black man in casual clothes standing in a multi-million-dollar penthouse, and his prejudice filled in the blanks. He did not see a federal agent. He saw a thug. He saw a burglar. Or worse, he saw someone he considered beneath him, someone he could bully. "Who the hell are you?" Tyler demanded, stepping in front of Chloe. "You got 5 seconds to explain why you are in my house before I throw you off this balcony." I winced in London. Tyler had just threatened a U.S. Marshal with lethal force. Dante finally spoke. His voice was low, gravelly, and terrifyingly calm. It cut through the thumping bass of the music like a razor blade. "Your house?" Dante asked. "Yeah, my house," Tyler spat, taking a step closer, invading Dante's personal space. "I am the owner, and you are trespassing." Dante tilted his head slightly. A small humorless smile played on his lips. It was the smile of a predator who realizes the prey has nowhere to run. "Is that right?" Dante said softly. "You own this property?" "I do." Tyler lied, his voice cracking slightly under the intensity of Dante's stare. "Now get out, or I am calling the cops." The irony was so thick I could taste it. The criminal was threatening to call the police on the law enforcement officer. "Go ahead," Dante said. He reached into his back pocket. Tyler flinched, raising his hands as if he expected a punch, but Dante only pulled out a small black remote. He pointed it at the wall. The music cut out instantly. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. "Hey," Chloe yelled. "I was listening to that." Dante ignored her. He looked at Tyler. He looked at the whiskey glass in Tyler's hand. "That is Pappy Van Winkle 23, Dante observed. "So what?" Tyler sneered. "I can afford it." Dante took another step forward. The air in the room seemed to drop another 10 degrees. "You opened my mail," Dante said. "You drank my bourbon. You destroyed my rug. And you plugged a foreign device into a government-issued computer." Tyler froze. The color drained from his face. The mention of the computer hit him hard. He realized in a flash of panic that this man knew about the office. I don't know what you are talking about, Tyler stammered, taking a step back. Chloe, however, was too drunk to pick up on the shift in power dynamics. She shoved Tyler aside and got right in Dante's face. "Excuse me?" she yelled. "Your rug. Your bourbon. Who do you think you are? You are probably just the maintenance man trying to scam us. I am going to report you to the building management. My sister owns this place, Jasmine. She is a CFO. Do you know what that means? It means she makes more money in a day than you make in a year." She poked Dante in the chest. "Get out!" she screamed. "Get out before I have my husband kick your ass." Dante looked down at her finger on his chest. He looked at it for a long second. Then he looked up at Tyler, who was now backing away toward the kitchen, looking for a weapon or an exit. "Husband," Dante asked, his voice flat. "Yeah, that is right," Chloe said, crossing her arms triumphantly. Dante sighed. It was a sound of pure exhaustion. He reached for his waistband. "Okay," he said. Chloe's eyes went wide. She thought he was reaching for a weapon to attack them. She finally felt a flicker of real fear. "He has got a gun!" Chloe shrieked, scrambling backward and knocking over a vase. "Tyler, do something." Tyler did nothing. He was paralyzed. Dante did not pull out a gun, not yet. He pulled out his badge. He flipped it open, the gold star gleaming under the recessed lighting of the foyer. "United States Marshals Service," Dante announced, his voice booming, now filling the silent apartment. "Everyone on the ground. Now." The room went deathly still. Marcus woke up on the couch, rubbing his eyes. What? Marcus mumbled. "Who is yelling on the ground?" Dante roared the command, carrying the weight of 1,000 raids. Chloe stared at the badge. She stared at the man. Her brain tried to compute the information, but it clashed too violently with her reality. "No," she whispered. "That is fake. You bought that online. You are trying to rob us." She grabbed a heavy glass ashtray from the console table and hurled it at him. It was a pathetic throw. It missed Dante by a foot and shattered against the wall behind him. But it was the final straw. It was assault on a federal officer. Dante moved. He moved faster than anyone in that room could track. He didn't draw his weapon. He didn't need to. He closed the distance to Tyler in 2 strides. The party was over. The lesson was about to begin. The air in the penthouse was thick enough to choke on. The silence that followed Dante silencing the music was not peaceful. It was the heavy, pressurized silence that comes right before an explosion. I sat in London, my hands gripping the edge of the conference table, so hard my knuckles turned white. I knew exactly who Dante Vance was. I knew his background. I knew that he had spent 3 years in a fugitive apprehension task force, hunting down some of the most violent criminals in the Midwest. And now my sister, a woman whose biggest conflict in life was a barista getting her order wrong, was standing 3 feet away from him, poking the bear. "Get out!" Chloe repeated, her voice rising to a shriek that cracked under the strain of her own entitlement. "Do you hear me? I said get out. You are harassing us. I am going to call the police and tell them a strange man broke into my apartment and is threatening me." She pulled out her phone, her fingers fumbling over the screen as she tried to dial 911. The audacity was breathtaking. She was actually going to call the authorities to report the lawful resident of the property she had broken into. It was a level of delusion that required a complete detachment from reality. She truly believed that because she was in the space, she owned it. She believed that her presence superseded his legal rights. Dante did not move to stop her phone call. He did not seem concerned about the police arriving. In fact, his posture suggested he would welcome them. He stood perfectly still, his breathing, even his hands resting loosely by his sides. But his eyes were moving. They shifted away from Chloe's hysterical face and drifted down to the floor. I watched on the high-definition feed as his gaze locked onto the pile of sodden black fabric in the corner of the living room. It was his suit jacket, the one Tyler had pulled from the closet. the one Tyler had used to mop up the spilled bourbon and red wine before kicking it aside like garbage. The jacket was a mess of purple stains and wet wool crumpled into a ball. I saw a muscle in Dante's jaw jump. It was a small movement, barely perceptible, but to me it looked like a seismic shift. That jacket was not just clothing. It was part of his uniform. It was part of the discipline and order he maintained in his chaotic life. Seeing it treated with such casual, arrogant disrespect seemed to flip a switch deep inside him. His eyes traveled from the jacket up to Tyler. Tyler was standing a few feet behind Chloe, swaying slightly. He saw Dante looking at him. He saw the judgment in Dante's eyes, the cold calculation of a man who was measuring him and finding him wanting. And Tyler, fueled by alcohol and a fragile, toxic ego, could not handle it. He felt small. He felt exposed. And when a man like Tyler feels small, he tries to make himself big through violence. "What are you looking at?" Tyler spat, stepping out from behind Chloe. He puffed out his chest, trying to look imposing. He was shirtless, his jeans sagging slightly, holding a glass of whiskey that did not belong to him. Compared to Dante, who stood like a statue carved out of granite, Tyler looked like a toddler throwing a tantrum. "You got a problem with my cleaning methods," Tyler sneered, mistaking Dante. Silence for fear. "That is right. I used your cheap coat to wipe the floor. What are you going to do about it?" Dante said nothing. He simply looked at Tyler with an expression that was almost pitying. It was the look a wolf gives a barking chihuahua before it ends the conversation. "Stop looking at me like that!" Tyler yelled, his voice cracking. The other guests in the room, Marcus and the yoga girls, had backed away against the wall. They were sober enough to realize that the energy in the room had shifted from awkward to dangerous. They saw something in Dante's stance that Tyler was too drunk to see. They saw the coiled energy of a spring about to release. Tyler, however, felt he had an audience to impress. He had to defend his territory. He had to show his wife and his friends that he was the alpha male in the room. "I am talking to you," Tyler shouted. "You are deaf," I said. "Get the hell out of my house!" He lunged forward. It was a clumsy telegraphed move. Tyler reached out with his free hand, intending to shove Dante in the chest to push him back toward the elevator. It was the kind of move you see in bar fights, a sloppy assertion of dominance. I held my breath. Tyler's hand made contact with Dante's shoulder. That was the mistake. The moment Tyler touched him, the air in the room seemed to shatter. Dante reacted not with anger but with pure, trained instinct. It was a blur of motion so fast that the camera frame rate barely caught it. Dante's right hand came up, clamping over Tyler's wrist like a steel vise. In the same motion, he stepped in, closing the distance between them, invading Tyler's center of gravity. He twisted. It was a classic wrist lock executed with the precision of a master. He rotated Tyler's arm outward, locking the joint against its natural range of motion. Tyler's eyes went wide. The whiskey glass slipped from his other hand, falling to the floor with a crash that no one heard because it was drowned out by the sound that followed. Snap! It was a wet, sickening crunch. The sound of the radius and ulna bones in Tyler's forearm giving way under the immense torque Dante applied. Tyler's mouth opened in a silent scream for a split second before the sound actually came out. Then he shrieked. It was a high animalistic sound of pure agony. But Dante was not done. The break was just the control mechanism. With Tyler compromised and off balance, Dante swept his leg. He kicked Tyler feet out from under him while pulling down on the broken arm. Gravity did the rest. Tyler's body hit the marble floor with a thud that shook the camera. He landed hard on his side, his arm twisted at an impossible angle behind his back. Dante did not scramble. He did not breathe heavy. He simply dropped to one knee, placing his shin across Tyler's neck, pinning him to the ground effortlessly. He held Tyler's broken wrist in one hand, keeping him immobilized with a pressure that must have been excruciating. The entire sequence had taken less than 3 seconds. One moment Tyler was standing, shouting, playing the big man. The next he was writhing on the floor, broken and pinned by a man who hadn't even broken a sweat. "Ah, my arm! My arm!" Tyler screamed, thrashing his legs against the floor. "He broke my arm." Chloe stood frozen, her phone still pressed to her ear. She stared down at her husband, her mouth gaping open. She could not process what had just happened. The violence had been so sudden, so professional, that it didn't look real. You hurt him," Chloe whispered, her voice trembling. Dante looked up at her. His face was devoid of emotion. He was not angry. He was just working. "Drop the phone," Dante commanded. Chloe dropped it. It clattered to the floor next to Tyler's head. "Back up," Dante said to the room at large. Marcus and the girls scrambled backward, tripping over each other to get as far away from him as possible. They were terrified. They realized now that this was not a prank. This was not a misunderstanding. They were in a room with a man who could dismantle them without blinking. I watched Tyler's face on the screen. He was sobbing now, tears streaming down his face, snot running from his nose. The arrogance was gone. The bravado was gone. All that was left was a scared man in a lot of pain who had realized too late that he was not the main character in this story. "Please," Tyler whimpered, his face pressed against the cold marble. "Please let me go. It hurts. Oh God, it hurts." Dante leaned in close to Tyler's ear. The microphone on Tyler's chest picked up Dante's voice clearly. "You touched a federal officer," Dante whispered. "That is a felony assault. You are under arrest." He reached behind his back with his free hand and pulled out a pair of handcuffs. I sat back in my chair in London, letting out a breath I didn't know I had been holding. My hands were shaking. Seeing Tyler broken on the floor should have been horrifying, but all I felt was a grim sense of satisfaction. Tyler had spent his whole life bullying people, using his privilege and his size to intimidate. He had bullied me for years. He had bullied my parents. But today he had tried to bully the wrong man, and reality had hit him back, hard. Chloe fell to her knees beside them, sobbing hysterically. "You can't arrest him. We are just guests. Jasmine invited us. Call Jasmine. She will tell you." Dante snapped the cuffs onto Tyler's wrists. Tyler screamed again as the metal bit into his broken skin. "Jasmine is not here," Dante said, standing up and hauling Tyler to his feet by his good arm. "And even if she was, she couldn't help you now." He dragged Tyler toward the kitchen island and shoved him down onto a stool. Tyler slumped over, cradling his broken arm against his chest, weeping. Dante turned back to Chloe. "Sit down," he ordered. Chloe sat. She sat right on the floor in the middle of the mess she had made, ruining her dress on the spilled wine she had ignored earlier. The sirens began to wail in the distance. I could hear them through the open windows. They were getting louder. The cavalry was coming. But the war was already over. Dante Vance had won without firing a single shot. The sound of Tyler screaming was arguably the most honest thing that had happened in that apartment all day. For years, I had watched my brother-in-law strut around with a false sense of bravado, puffing out his chest and acting like the toughest man in the room. But the moment real violence touched him, the moment he faced a man who did not care about his ego or his empty threats, he crumbled. He was not a fighter. He was just a loud noise that had finally been silenced. The chaos that followed his takedown was immediate and pathetic. The audience my sister had invited, the people she wanted to impress so badly, did not rush to help. They did not try to intervene or de-escalate the situation. Marcus, the man who had been laughing at my expense just moments before, scrambled off the sofa so fast he tripped over his own feet. He dropped his beer can, sending a spray of cheap lager across the already ruined Persian rug, adding insult to injury. "I am out," Marcus yelled, his voice cracking. "I did not do anything. I just got here." He bolted for the door, abandoning his best friend on the floor without a second glance. The two yoga instructors, Sarah and Jen, were right behind him. They grabbed their mats and their purses, their faces pale with terror. They did not care about Chloe. They did not care about the injustice they thought they were witnessing. They only cared about self-preservation. They ran like rats, fleeing a sinking ship, leaving the door wide open behind them as they sprinted toward the elevator. I watched them go on the security feed, feeling a grim satisfaction. This was the quality of company my sister kept. Fair weather friends who were there for the free champagne but vanished the second reality set in. Chloe, however, did not run. She was too paralyzed by shock and too fueled by entitlement to leave. She stood over Tyler, her hands trembling, staring at Dante as if he were a monster. To her, this was not a lawful arrest. This was an assault on her dignity. In her mind, she was still the queen of the castle, and Dante was the usurper. "You broke his arm!" Chloe screamed, her voice shrill and piercing. "You maniac! Look at him! He is bleeding!" She pointed a shaking finger at Dante, her eyes wild. "You are dead!" she shrieked. "You hear me? You are so dead! My sister is going to sue you for everything you have. You are going to rot in prison for this. You cannot just walk into people's houses and attack them." Dante ignored her threats. He was focused on securing Tyler. He pulled a second pair of zip ties from his tactical belt. He was efficient, moving with a practiced economy of motion. He secured Tyler's ankles effectively, trussing him up like a turkey. Tyler was still sobbing into the floor, muttering about lawsuits and pain, but he had stopped fighting. The fight had been knocked out of him the moment his wrist snapped. Only when Tyler was fully immobilized did Dante stand up. He rose slowly, unfolding his height until he towered over Chloe. He did not look winded. He did not look angry. He looked like a man who was clocking in for a shift he had not asked for. Chloe backed away until she hit the wall, her chest heaving. "Stay away from me," she hissed. "I am calling the police." Dante reached into his back pocket. "I already did," he said calmly. He pulled out a leather wallet. He flipped it open with a snap of his wrist. The gold badge inside caught the light from the chandelier. It was heavy. It was authoritative. It was the kind of badge that stopped arguments before they started. At the same time, he reached to his hip and adjusted his jacket, revealing the Sig Sauer pistol holstered at his waist. He did not draw it. He did not point it at her. He simply let her see it. He let her see that he was not a burglar. He was not a maintenance man. He was the state monopoly on violence standing in her living room. "Dante Vance," he announced, his voice filling the room with a terrifying resonance. "United States Marshal. Fugitive Apprehension Task Force." Chloe's mouth dropped open. She stared at the badge. She blinked, trying to make the words make sense. Marshal. That was not a mall cop. That was not even a regular police officer. That was federal. What she whispered. "No, that is fake. You are lying." Dante ignored her denial. He began to recite the charges, his tone flat and administrative, as if he were reading a grocery list. "You and your husband are currently under arrest for violation of Title 18 United States Code, specifically trespassing on federal property, destruction of government property, and in the case of your husband, assault on a federal officer." He took a step closer to her. "You have the right to remain silent," he continued, "though I highly suggest you start exercising it immediately because you are digging yourself a very deep hole." Chloe shook her head frantically. Her brain was short-circuiting. She could not reconcile the image of this man with the narrative she had built. "Federal property," she stammered. "What are you talking about? This is my sister's apartment. Jasmine owns this place." She looked at the camera as if pleading with me directly. "Jasmine," she screamed at the ceiling. Tell him this is your house. Tell him to get out." Dante looked at her with pity. It was the first time I saw something other than cold professionalism in his eyes. He actually felt sorry for her stupidity. "Your sister," Dante said, slowly enunciating every word, "terminated her lease 2 weeks ago." The silence that fell over the room was absolute. Even Tyler stopped whimpering for a second. Chloe froze. What she breathed. "She moved out," Dante explained. "She vacated the premises on the 15th of the month. She handed over the keys. She signed the paperwork. This unit was then immediately leased by the United States Department of Justice for use as a secure safe house." He gestured around the room. "The furniture mine. The alcohol you drank mine. The rug your husband destroyed mine." Chloe's face went pale. All the blood drained from her cheeks, leaving her looking like a ghost. "No," she whispered. "That is impossible." "She would have told us, would she?" Dante asked. "Or did she tell you to stay away? Did she send you a warning that you ignored because you thought you knew better?" I sat in London watching the realization hit her like a physical blow. I could see the gears turning in her head. She was replaying the last 24 hours, the text messages I had sent, the specific wording I had used. "I do not live there anymore. Do not open that door." I had not lied. I had been perfectly legally precise, and she had interpreted my warning as selfishness. She had interpreted my absence as an opportunity. But Chloe stammered, tears welling up in her eyes. "But we are family. She wouldn't let us break into a cop house. She wouldn't let us get arrested." Dante let out a short, harsh laugh. "Lady," he said, "I do not know your sister. But judging by the fact that she sent me the security footage of you breaking in 5 minutes before I got here, I would say she is done protecting you." He pulled out his phone and turned the screen toward her. It was the email I had sent him. The subject line read, "Unauthorized entry in Unit 4B. Suspects are Chloe and Tyler. Proceed with full legal protocol." Chloe stared at the screen. She saw my name. She saw my words. "Proceed with full legal protocol." That was the dagger. That was the moment she realized I was not just a passive observer. I was the architect of her downfall. I had not just let them fall. I had greased the floor. Why, she sobbed, her legs giving out. She slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor, surrounded by the wreckage of her own making. Why would she do this? "We just needed a place to stay. You broke into a federal agent home," Dante said, putting his phone away. "You compromised a secure location. You tried to hack a government laptop. This isn't a family dispute anymore. This is national security." He reached for his handcuffs again. "Stand up," he ordered. Chloe looked up at him, her face streaked with mascara. She looked like a child who had been caught stealing candy only to realize the candy was poisoned. "I didn't know," she wailed. "I swear I didn't know." "Ignorance of the law is not a defense," Dante said coldly. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." He pulled her up roughly. Chloe did not fight. She was too broken. She let him spin her around. She let him clamp the cold steel cuffs onto her wrists. As the metal clicked shut, I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't joy. It wasn't happiness. It was relief. It was the feeling of a heavy weight finally being lifted. For 35 years I had carried them. I had fixed their mistakes. I had paid their bail. I had cushioned every fall. But not today. Today they were falling without a parachute. Dante keyed his radio. "Dispatch, this is Vance. Suspects in custody. 1 male, 1 female. I need a bus for the male broken arm, and get a transport unit for the female. Also notify the Cybercrimes Division. We have a confirmed breach of the Tough Book." He looked directly at the security camera. He looked right at me, and for a brief second, he nodded. It was a silent acknowledgement. From one professional to another. He knew I was watching. He knew I had given him this win, and he was letting me know that he would finish the job. I watched as the flashing blue lights of the police cars finally illuminated the living room, painting the walls in chaotic bursts of color. The cavalry had arrived. Chloe was crying softly now, muttering my name over and over again. "Jasmine. Jasmine. Jasmine." But Jasmine was in London, and Jasmine was finally truly free. The arrival of the Chicago Police Department is usually a loud affair, but when the Federal Bureau of Investigation joins the party, the atmosphere shifts from chaotic to clinical. From my vantage point in London, watching through the lens of the security camera, I saw the transformation of my former home into a crime scene. The room, which had been filled with the thumping bass of hip-hop music and the smell of expensive whiskey just 20 minutes ago, was now swarming with uniforms. Blue strobe lights from the patrol cars on the street below washed over the living room walls, creating a disorienting rhythmic pulse that illuminated the faces of my defeated family members. Tyler was still slumped on the kitchen stool, his arm cradled against his chest, whimpering softly every time an officer moved near him. Chloe was sitting on the floor, her makeup smeared down her cheeks, staring blankly at the ruined Persian rug, as if it held the answers to why her life was falling apart. But the real gravity entered the room with two men in navy blue windbreakers, emblazoned with yellow letters that read, FBI. They didn't look at the broken glass or the spilled wine. They walked straight to the office, where the Panasonic Toughbook sat in the dark, its white LED beacon still pulsing silently. They were the cyber action team, and they treated the laptop like an unexploded bomb. Dante Vance stood in the center of the room, speaking quietly to a uniformed police captain. He looked calm, unbothered, the eye of the hurricane. He pointed to the camera, then to the laptop, then to Tyler. The captain nodded, taking notes, his expression serious. Then the elevator doors slid open again. I braced myself. I knew this moment was coming. My mother Viola and my father Otis burst into the apartment. They had clearly rushed over the moment Chloe called them, likely still in their pajamas under their trench coats. My mother looked frantic, her wig slightly askew, her eyes darting around the room until they landed on Chloe. My baby Viola screamed, the sound distorting slightly through my phone speakers. She rushed past a police officer who tried to stop her, ducking under his arm with a surprising agility. She threw herself onto the floor next to Chloe, wrapping her arms around my sister. "What did they do to you?" Viola wailed. "Who did this?" Then she saw Tyler. She saw the handcuffs. She saw the unnatural angle of his wrist. "Oh my God," she shrieked, turning to glare at Dante. "You animal! You broke his arm! He is a pianist! He is an artist! You crippled him!" Tyler, who had never played the piano in his life, and whose only artistry was scamming elderly people out of their pensions, nodded eagerly, playing the victim. "He attacked me!" "Mom," Tyler whined, "he just snapped it. I didn't do anything." The police captain stepped forward, his hand resting on his belt. "Ma'am, step back. These individuals are in federal custody." "Custody, my father?" Otis bellowed, his face turning a deep, angry purple. "For what?" "Coming to visit their sister." "Since when is visiting family a crime in this country? I know my rights. This is my daughter's apartment." Dante looked at my father. He didn't speak. He simply reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen a few times, bringing up the active call he had connected to me. Captain Dante said, his voice cutting through the noise. "I have the leaseholder on the line, or rather the previous leaseholder. I think we should clear up the ownership dispute right now." He held the phone out. The captain took it. "Ms. Brooks," the captain asked, his voice echoing in the silent London conference room. I took a sip of my Earl Grey tea. The ceramic cup felt warm and grounding in my hands. I looked out at the grey London skyline, taking a moment to center myself. This was it. The moment I had rehearsed in my head for years. The moment where I stopped protecting them from the consequences of their own actions. "This is Jasmine Brooks," I said, my voice steady, amplified by the speakerphone in the Chicago penthouse. "Jasmine," my mother screamed, scrambling to her feet and rushing toward the phone. "Jasmine, tell them to let your sister go. This man is crazy. He broke into your house and attacked Tyler, ma'am." "Stay back," the captain ordered, holding up a hand to stop her. He put the phone on speaker and held it up so everyone could hear. "Ms. Brooks, we have two individuals here, a Chloe Brooks and a Tyler Evans, who claim they have your permission to occupy this residence. They state that you are the owner and that they are house-sitting. Can you confirm this?" I leaned into my microphone. I could see them all on the video feed, my mother with her desperate, angry eyes, my father with his confused indignation, Chloe looking up with a glimmer of hope, thinking I would save her one last time, thinking that the shame of a public arrest would force me to lie for them. I paused for effect. I wanted them to feel the silence. "Officer," I said clearly, I do not know who told them that, but it was not me. I terminated my lease on this property on the 15th of this month. I have no legal claim to this apartment. The color drained from my father's face. What? He sputtered. Jasmine, what are you saying? I continued, ignoring him. Furthermore, I sent an email to those individuals 2 days ago, informing them that I had vacated the premises. Today, when I saw them on my security app attempting to pick the lock, I sent a text message explicitly warning them not to enter. I told them the property was no longer mine. They read the message and proceeded to break the lock anyway. Liar, Viola screamed. She lunged at the phone, but the officer pushed her back. You are a liar. I spoke to you. You didn't say that. I did, Mother. I said, my voice dropping an octave, becoming colder. You were just too busy calling me selfish to listen. I told you I didn't own it. You told me to stop lying. You told me I was being stingy. You ordered them to break in because you thought I was hoarding a luxury apartment from you. No! Viola sobbed, looking around the room as if seeking an ally. No, you set them up. You knew. You knew a cop lived here. I did not know who lived there. I lied smoothly. I only knew it wasn't me. And I knew that breaking into a home that isn't yours is a crime. You are the one who insisted Tyler deserved a certain standard of living. Well, he is experiencing federal hospitality now. Is that standard high enough for you? You are sick, my mother hissed, tears streaming down her face. You are a sick, jealous girl. You have always been jealous of Chloe. You did this to hurt her. You lured her into a trap. I lured no one, I countered. They walked in on their own 2 feet. They broke the lock with their own hands, and Tyler tried to hack a federal computer with his own stupidity. I am thousands of miles away, Mother. I am working. I am doing the job that paid for the car you drove here in. Do not blame me for their choices. The FBI agent who had been inspecting the laptop stepped forward. He leaned toward the phone. Ms. Brooks, this is Agent Miller. Are you stating for the record that you did not authorize Mr. Evans to access this computer? Absolutely not, I said. I don't own that computer. I have never seen it before today. If he accessed it, he did so with criminal intent. And knowing my brother-in-law, he was likely looking for money he didn't earn. Tyler let out a fresh wail of despair from the kitchen. He knew what that meant. He knew the difference between a family dispute and a federal indictment. That is enough, the police captain said. He looked at Dante. Mr. Vance, I think we have all we need. The trespass is confirmed. The homeowner dispute is resolved. Dante nodded. He looked at my parents. You two need to leave, Dante said. Unless you want to be charged as accessories. My father looked at me, or at least at the camera he thought I was watching. Jasmine, he said, his voice trembling with a mix of rage and fear. Fix this. Call your lawyer. Get your sister out of this. Right now. I am your father, and I am telling you to fix this. I took another sip of tea. The liquid was cooling, but it still tasted sweet. I can't, Dad, I said. It is out of my hands. It is in the hands of the United States government now. And honestly, I think they will do a better job of parenting Chloe than you ever did. Jasmine. Viola shrieked, her voice reaching a pitch that made the audio feed distort. You are dead to me. Do you hear me? You are dead. I reached for the button to end the call. I heard you the first time, Mother, I said softly. And for the record, the lock's on my London apartment. You don't have the keys to those either. Goodbye. If you're still here, leave a comment so I know you're with me. And tell me, if it were, would you walk away and let the law speak? Or stay just long enough to watch the truth surface? Quick note, the next part includes dramatized elements for storytelling and educational purposes. If you'd rather stop here, this is the moment. I tapped the red icon on my screen. The line went dead. On the video feed, I saw my mother collapse into my father's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. But she wasn't crying for me. She wasn't crying for the loss of her relationship with her eldest daughter. She was crying because her golden child was being hauled to her feet by a police officer. She was crying because the illusion of their perfect upper-class family had just been shattered by the cold, hard steel of handcuffs. I watched as the officers led Chloe and Tyler out of the apartment. Chloe was still looking back, her eyes wide with disbelief, as if she expected me to jump out of a closet and yell surprise. She couldn't comprehend a world where I didn't save her. Dante stood by the door watching them go. He looked tired. He looked ready for this night to be over. My parents lingered for a moment, yelling something at Dante that I couldn't hear because the audio had cut out when I hung up. But Dante just pointed at the elevator. Defeated, they turned and followed the police, leaving the penthouse silent once again. I sat alone in the London conference room. The adrenaline was starting to fade, replaced by a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. But underneath the tiredness there was something else. A lightness, a sense of space. For 35 years my mind had been a crowded house filled with their demands, their criticisms, their expectations. I had let them live rent-free in my head, breaking things, making messes I had to clean up. But tonight, I had evicted them. I looked at the black screen of my phone. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel sad. I felt like I had just finished a very long, very difficult project. And now, finally, I could rest. I closed the laptop, gathered my things, and walked out of the Shard. The London rain was falling, washing the city clean. I stepped out into the cool air, took a deep breath, and hailed a cab. I had a new life to live, and for the first time, it was entirely mine. The silence that descended on the penthouse after my parents were escorted out was heavy, but it was not empty. The police had cleared the room of the emotional debris, but the forensic evidence remained. I watched from London as the blue windbreakers of the FBI Cyber Action Team moved around the mahogany desk with surgical precision. They were not interested in the spilled wine or the broken furniture. Their entire focus was on the Panasonic Toughbook and the small silver USB drive that Tyler had so arrogantly plugged into it. Agent Miller, the lead investigator, put on a pair of latex gloves. He picked up the USB drive with a pair of tweezers, treating it like a radioactive isotope. To Tyler, that drive was just a tool, a keychain he carried around to impress people with his non-existent hacking skills. To the federal government, it was a foreign object that had attempted to penetrate a secure Department of Justice network. I took a sip of water, watching closely. I expected them to bag it and tag it for the lab. I expected the feed to end there. But federal agents do not wait when there is a potential active cyber threat. They need to know immediately what kind of malware they are dealing with. Miller pulled out a hardened field tablet, a rugged device designed to safely analyze data without connecting to the internet. He plugged Tyler's USB drive into the tablet. I leaned closer to my screen. I wondered what kind of script Tyler had bought from the dark web. Probably some cheap password cracker or a keylogger. Amateur hour stuff. Miller stared at the tablet screen. He tapped a few keys, then he stopped. He frowned. He swiped across the screen, reading something intently. His expression shifted from professional concern to genuine confusion, and then to something that looked a lot like disbelief. Vance Miller called out to Dante, who was standing by the window writing his report. "You are going to want to see this." Dante walked over his boots, crunching softly on the broken glass of the picture frame Chloe had knocked over. "Is it a worm?" Dante asked. "Did the payload execute?" "No," Miller said, shaking his head. "That is the thing. The hacking tool is garbage. It is a 3-year-old script that the firewall neutralized in a nanosecond. That is not the problem." "Then what is?" Dante asked. Miller turned the tablet so Dante could see. "The idiot didn't just partition the drive for the malware," Miller said, his voice carrying a mix of awe and amusement. "He is using this stick as his primary storage device. He has got the hacking tool in one folder, but look at the rest of the directory." I strained to see, but the angle was too sharp. I could only hear them. Dante squinted at the screen. "Evans Real Estate Holdings," Dante read aloud. "Alpha Investments, Ledger 2023. Client list." I sat up straight in my chair. Those names sounded familiar. Tyler had been bragging about his investment firm for years, claiming he was flipping houses in distressed neighborhoods. He always had a new pitch, a new scheme, a new reason why he needed a bridge loan from my parents. "Open the ledger," Dante commanded. Miller tapped the screen. "Holy Mother of God," Miller whispered. "What am I looking at?" Dante asked. "You are looking at a classic Ponzi structure," Miller said, scrolling rapidly. "Look at these inflows. Deposits from senior citizens' pension funds, church groups. And look at the outflows. There are no property purchases, Vance, no title fees, no renovation costs. The money comes in, and it goes straight out to offshore accounts in the Caymans and a shell company in Delaware." My jaw dropped. I knew Tyler was a loser. I knew he was a mooch. But I had never realized the scale of his deception. He wasn't just bad with money. He was a criminal. He was running a full-blown money laundering operation, taking cash from vulnerable people and funneling it into his own pockets to fund the lifestyle he felt he deserved. The lifestyle he blamed me for not providing. "And he carries the books on his keychain?" Dante asked, sounding incredulous. "Paranoia," Miller replied. "He probably does not trust the cloud. He keeps the only copy of the real books on him at all times, so his partners cannot screw him over. And he just plugged it directly into a U.S. Marshall Field computer." I started laughing. I sat alone in a conference room in London, laughing until tears pricked my eyes. It was the laughter of pure, unadulterated shock. Tyler had accused me of hiding money. He had accused me of having a secret slush fund. He had broken into my house to find my dirty secrets. And in his greed, in his desperate attempt to find something to steal, he had literally handed the FBI the smoking gun for his own crimes. If he had just left the laptop alone, he might have walked away with a trespassing charge, a slap on the wrist, probation. But because he had to be the big man, because he had to prove he was a hacker, he had committed professional suicide. Dante looked up from the tablet. He looked directly at the security camera again. He knew I was listening. "Ms. Brooks," Dante said, addressing the room as if I were standing there. "Did you hear that I unmuted my microphone?" "I heard it, Agent Vance," I said. "And I wish I could say I am surprised. But Tyler has always been ambitious with the truth." "This changes everything," Miller said, pulling the USB drive out and dropping it into an evidence bag. He sealed it with a sharp zip sound that felt like a guillotine dropping. "This is not just a local PD matter anymore. We are taking jurisdiction." "Can you explain the charges?" I asked. I wanted to hear it. I needed to hear the math. Dante cleared his throat. He looked at his notes. "Well, Ms. Brooks," Dante began. "We started with trespassing and assault on a federal officer. That alone was going to get him 3 to 5 years. But this," he pointed at the evidence bag, "attempted unauthorized access of a Department of Justice terminal is a violation of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. That is a 10-year maximum right there. But the contents of the drive triggered a RICO predicate: wire fraud, mail fraud, money laundering, and since he tried to use a government computer to facilitate the transfer of data related to these crimes, we can tack on cyber espionage enhancements." He paused, doing the mental calculation. "Conservatively," Dante said, "your brother-in-law is looking at 15 years in federal prison. Minimum. No parole. And since the Bureau seizes assets derived from criminal activity, any money he has, any car he drives, and likely any shared assets he has with your sister, are now property of the United States government." 15 years. Tyler was 34. He would be 50 years old when he saw freedom again. He would miss the prime of his life. He would miss everything. And he had done it to himself. "And Chloe?" I asked, my voice quieter. "She is his spouse," Dante said, "and she is listed as a partner in Evans Real Estate Holdings on these documents. Unless she turns state evidence and testifies against him, she is going down as a co-conspirator. She might get a lighter sentence, maybe 3 to 5 years if she pleads out, but her life as she knows it is over." I sat back, letting the information wash over me. My mother had screamed that I killed my sister. In a way, she was right. I had killed the version of my sister that existed in their fantasy world. The Chloe who got away with everything. The Chloe who was protected by her looks and her parents' denial. That Chloe was dead. The woman sitting in the back of the police cruiser downstairs was now defendant number 2 in a federal fraud case. "Thank you, Agent Vance," I said. "Don't thank me," Dante replied, his voice dry. "Thank your brother-in-law. We have been trying to track down the source of those fraudulent pension schemes in the Midwest for 6 months. We had no leads. He just walked into my house and gave us the roadmap." He signaled to the other agents. "Pack it up, we are done here. Seal the room." I watched as they finished their work. They photographed the damage. They bagged the whiskey bottle for fingerprints. They took the ruined suit jacket. As the lights in the apartment were turned off one by one, leaving only the city lights of Chicago streaming through the open windows, I realized something profound. The revenge I had wanted was simple. I wanted them to be embarrassed. I wanted them to be humbled. But the universe had delivered something far more poetic. Tyler's greed was a trap that he had built for himself, brick by brick, lie by lie. All I had done was open the door. The feed went dark as Dante cut the power to the local server for security. I was left with my reflection in the black screen of my laptop. I picked up my phone and saw a text message from my lawyer. It was a draft of the restraining order I had asked for earlier. "Do you still want to file this?" the text read. I typed back immediately. "No need. The Federal Bureau of Prisons will handle the restraining order for me. They are very good at keeping people away." I stood up and walked to the window of the conference room. London was waking up. The sun was just starting to crest over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pale gray and gold. My phone buzzed one last time. It was a notification from my bank. An automatic transfer I had set up years ago. $500 sent to my mother account on the first of every month to help with her bills. I opened the banking app. Cancel recurring transfer. Confirm. Done. I put the phone in my pocket. I had a meeting in 3 hours. I had a merger to close. I had a life to build that was free of anchors and dead weight. I walked out of the room, leaving the ghosts of my family behind in the dark, locked in a cage of their own making. And for the first time in my life, I didn't look back. The fallout was faster than I expected, and far more brutal than I could have orchestrated. In the age of the internet, privacy is a myth, and humiliation is a spectator sport. By the time I woke up the next morning in London, the story had already jumped from the police blotter to the gossip blogs, and from there to the national news cycle. The headline on a popular urban culture site read, "Instagram baddie breaks into federal safe house, finds out the hard way." Below it was a side-by-side comparison. On the left was the selfie Chloe had taken in the penthouse, filtered to perfection, captioned, "New home, new blessings." On the right was her mugshot released by the Cook County Sheriff Office. In the booking photo, her hair was a matted mess. Her mascara was running in dark streaks down her cheeks, and her eyes held the vacant, terrified stare of a deer caught in the headlights of a semi-truck. I scrolled through the comments, sipping my coffee. The internet is a cruel place, but sometimes its cruelty aligns perfectly with justice. People had dug up her old posts, the ones where she bragged about her hustle and her grind. They were reposting them with laughing emojis, contrasting her captions with the reality of her husband's Ponzi scheme. Someone had commented, "Imagine breaking into a house to flex for the gram and getting a RICO charge instead." Another wrote, "Her husband tried to hack the FBI with a USB stick from 2010. These two are the Bonnie and Clyde of stupidity." It was trending. The hashtag Penthouse Prison Princess was number 3 on Twitter. My sister wanted fame. She wanted to be known. She wanted the world to look at her. Well, she got her wish. The entire world was looking, and they were laughing. But while the internet was having its fun, the reality on the ground for my parents was a nightmare of a different variety. The federal government does not play games with asset forfeiture. Because Tyler had used family accounts to move some of his stolen money, and because Chloe was a signatory on those accounts, the Department of Justice had frozen everything. My mother's checking account. My father's retirement fund. The joint savings they had used to bail Chloe out of trouble a dozen times before. All of it was locked down pending a forensic financial audit. And lawyers who specialize in defending clients against federal cyber espionage and money laundering charges do not work pro bono. They do not take payment plans. They require six-figure retainers upfront in cash. I watched the second tragedy unfold, not through a security camera, but through the desperate manic updates in the family group chat, which I had not yet left. My mother was posting frantic messages asking for recommendations for criminal defense attorneys. Then she was asking about quick home equity loans. Then the tone shifted to panic, as she realized that with their assets frozen, no bank would touch them. 3 days after the arrest, I received a notification from a real estate listing alert I still had active for my parents' neighborhood. New listing, 3200 Oakwood Drive. My stomach turned. That was the house I grew up in, the sprawling 4-bedroom colonial with the manicured lawn and the heated pool, the house that was the symbol of my parents' status in the community, the house they had prioritized over my college tuition, the fortress of expectations where I had never been good enough. They had listed it for a fire sale price, cash offers only, immediate closing. They were selling their legacy to keep Tyler and Chloe out of prison for a few more months. They were liquidating 40 years of hard work to pay for a defense that was doomed to fail. I stared at the listing photos. The living room where I was told to be quiet, the dining room where I was told to find another table. It was all going to be gone. My phone rang. It was my father. I let it go to voicemail. Then my mother called. Then my father again. Finally, I picked up. I needed to say it. I needed to say the words out loud so they would echo in their heads when they were sleeping in a rental apartment. "Hello," I said. "Jasmine." My father's voice was unrecognizable. It was thin shaking, stripped of all its usual bluster and authority. "Jasmine, please, you have to help us." "I am not a lawyer, Dad," I said calmly. "We are losing the house," he choked out. "We have to sell the house to pay the retainer for the firm. They want $200,000 just to take the case. Tyler is looking at 20 years. Chloe is looking at 5. We can't let them go to prison, Jasmine. Chloe, she won't survive in there. She is too soft. She is 32 years old," I said. "She is not a child. She is your sister." My mother grabbed the phone, screaming into the receiver. "How can you be so cold? We are selling everything. We are going to be homeless because of this." "You have the money. I know you do. You just closed that deal in London. You could write a check today and save this family." "Save the family?" I asked, "or save the image of the family?" I walked over to the window of my office. The city of London was bustling below me. Millions of people living their lives, facing consequences, making choices. "Mom, listen to me," I said. "If I write that check, what happens next? Do you think a high-priced lawyer can make the evidence disappear?" Tyler handed the FBI a ledger of his crimes. He assaulted a federal officer on video. There is no saving him. "All you are doing is throwing your money into a fire." "I don't care," Viola sobbed. "We have to try. We are begging you, please, just this once. Be the big sister, be the daughter we raised." "The daughter you raised," I said slowly, letting the anger simmer down into a cold, hard fact, was raised to be independent. The daughter you raised was told she had to work twice as hard to get half as much. And I did. I worked, I saved, I built, I paused. And now you want me to take the fruits of my labor and give it to the people who spit on me. You want me to fund the defense of the man who destroyed my home and the woman who called me selfish for not letting her break the law." "Yes," Viola screamed. "Yes. Because that is what family does." "No, Mother," I said. "That is what victims do. And I am done being your victim. There was a silence on the line. Heavy, suffocating. That money from the house sale, I continued. That is your retirement. That is your health care. That is your future. If you spend it on Tyler, you will be destitute in 5 years. And when that happens, do not call me. You wouldn't, my father whispered. You wouldn't let us starve. I warned you, I said. I sent the email. I sent the text. I told you not to let them in. You chose to ignore me because you respected Tyler's whiteness more than you respected my word. You chose to back the wrong horse. And now you are losing the farm. That is not my fault. That is the consequence of your investment strategy. Jasmine. Don't you dare hang up, my mother threatened, but the fire was gone from her voice. It was just fear now. I am not just hanging up, I said. I am opting out. I pulled the phone away from my ear. I could hear my mother wailing in the distance, a sound of pure, unadulterated grief. But it wasn't grief for me. It was grief for the house. It was grief for the status. It was grief for the lie they had lived for so long. Goodbye, I said. I pressed the red button. Then I went into my settings. I blocked my father's number. I blocked my mother's number. I blocked the house line. I blocked their email addresses. I went to the family group chat, the one where they had ignored my messages for years, the one where they only spoke to me to ask for favors. I typed one last message. I hope the lawyer is worth it. Then I hit leave conversation. I sat there for a moment staring at the phone. I expected to feel guilty. I expected to feel a pang of regret. That is what we are conditioned to feel, isn't it? That we owe our families everything, even our own destruction. But I didn't feel it. I felt the way I felt when I closed a bad account at work. I felt the way I felt when I cut losses on a failing investment. It was just business. I opened my banking app and looked at my savings. The numbers were there. Solid, secure, mine. They would sell the house. They would pay the lawyer. Tyler would still go to prison. Chloe would still have a felony record. And my parents would spend their golden years in a rented apartment wondering where it all went wrong. They would blame me, of course. They would tell everyone who would listen that I was the villain, the ungrateful daughter who turned her back on her flesh and blood. Let them talk. I had a plane to catch. I had a new property to view in the south of France. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't bringing any baggage with me. 6 months is a long time in the corporate world, but it feels like an eternity in the federal justice system. The seasons had changed outside the heavy limestone walls of the Dirksen Federal Building in Chicago, turning from the gray sludge of winter to the tentative green of spring, but inside courtroom 14B time seemed to have stopped completely. The air smelled of floor wax and old paper, a scent that I used to associate with safety and order, but which now smelled distinctly like the end of a life. I arrived early. I did not come through the back entrance or try to hide from the press. I walked through the front doors, my heels clicking on the terrazzo floor with a rhythm that sounded like a ticking clock. I had chosen my outfit with the same precision I applied to a merger acquisition. I wore a white suit. It was not cream, and it was not ivory. It was a stark, blinding architectural white that caught the light and held it. In a room full of dark wood and gray suits, I wanted to look like the only clean thing in the room. When the bailiff opened the doors and I stepped into the gallery, the silence was immediate. My parents were already there sitting in the second row. They looked like strangers. In 6 months, they had aged 10 years. My father, Otis, who used to wear his suits like armor, now looked like he was shrinking inside his jacket. His posture was collapsed, his eyes darting around the room as if looking for an exit that did not exist. My mother, Viola, was worse. She was not crying. She was staring straight ahead, her face a mask of bitter frozen shock. They had sold the house on Oakwood Drive. They were living in a 2-bedroom rental near the airport now. The kingdom had fallen, and they were just 2 old people sitting in the wreckage. Then the side door opened, and the marshals brought them in. Tyler came first. The man who had strutted around my apartment drinking 30-year-old whiskey and calling himself an investor was gone. In his place was a pale, shaking man in an orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. His arm, the one Dante had broken, was out of the cast, but he held it close to his body, as if he was afraid the air itself might hurt him. He did not look at the gallery. He did not look at his wife. He looked at the floor. And then Chloe. Seeing my sister in shackles was a physical blow, but not in the way my mother would have wanted. I did not feel pity. I felt a strange sense of alignment. For the first time in her life, her outside matched her inside. She looked small. Her hair, which she used to spend hours highlighting and styling, was pulled back in a severe knot, showing her dark roots. Her skin was sallow without her expensive creams and filters. She scanned the room, desperate for contact, and when her eyes locked onto mine, she flinched. She saw the white suit. She saw the diamonds in my ears. She saw that I was whole while she was broken. All rise. The judge was a woman with steel gray hair and eyes that had seen every variation of human greed imaginable. She sat down and the proceedings began. It was not a long trial. The evidence was overwhelming. But the prosecution needed to establish one crucial fact. They needed to prove that this was not a misunderstanding. They needed to prove intent. The prosecutor called me to the stand. I walked up the short set of stairs and took my seat. I placed my hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. It was the easiest promise I had ever made. Ms. Brooks, the prosecutor, began, his voice echoing in the high-ceilinged room. Can you tell the court the nature of your relationship with the defendants? They are my sister and my brother-in-law, I said, my voice steady and clear. And on the date of the incident, did you give them permission to enter the premises at the penthouse? No, I said. I explicitly forbade it. The defense attorney, a tired-looking public defender who knew he was fighting a losing battle, tried to object. He tried to paint a picture of a confused family dynamic of mixed signals. He tried to suggest that my silence in the past had created an implied consent. But the prosecutor had the silver bullet. Your Honor, the government would like to enter Exhibit 4A into evidence. This is a recording of a phone call between the witness and her mother, Viola Brooks, taken minutes before the breach occurred. My mother gasped in the gallery. She had forgotten. In her arrogance, she had forgotten that I told her I was recording. The bailiff pressed play. My mother's voice filled the courtroom, loud and screeching, amplified by the high-quality speakers. Tyler is a white man, Jasmine. He comes from a certain background. He is used to a certain standard of living. You have plenty. You have more than you need. Why do you have to make him suffer? And then my voice, calm and distant. Mom, listen to me. I am recording this call. I want you to go on the record saying that you instructed Chloe and Tyler to break into a property that I told you I do not own. And then the nail in the coffin. Don't you dare threaten me, you ungrateful little brat. If you do not give them the Wi-Fi password and apologize to Tyler, you are dead to us. The silence that followed the recording was suffocating. The jury looked at the defense table with open disgust. The judge looked at my parents with a cold, hard stare. The recording did not just prove trespassing. It proved entitlement. It proved that they viewed the law as a suggestion and my property as their right. It stripped away the facade of the loving family and revealed the transactional, predatory nature of their love. Chloe put her head in her hands and began to weep silently. Tyler just stared at the table. I was dismissed from the stand. I walked back to my seat, not looking at my parents. I could feel their eyes on me, burning with hatred, but I did not care. Their anger was impotent now. It had no power over me. The sentencing phase moved quickly. The judge did not mince words. She looked at Tyler first. Mr. Evans, she said, leaning forward over the bench, you entered a federal safe house. You destroyed government property. You assaulted a federal agent. Those crimes alone would warrant a significant sentence. But your arrogance led to the discovery of a much larger crime. The USB drive you attempted to use on a Department of Justice computer contained irrefutable evidence of a Ponzi scheme that defrauded over 50 elderly individuals of their life savings. Tyler flinched as she spoke. You are a predator, Mr. Evans. You preyed on the vulnerable to fund a lifestyle you could not earn, and when you ran out of victims, you tried to prey on your sister-in-law. It ends today. She banged the gavel. On the charges of wire fraud, money laundering, and assault on a federal officer, I sentence you to 144 months in federal prison. That is 12 years, Mr. Evans, with no possibility of parole. Tyler made a sound like a wounded animal. 12 years. He would go in a young man and come out middle-aged. His life was effectively over. The judge turned to Chloe. Mrs. Evans, stand up. Chloe stood, her legs shaking so badly she had to hold onto the table. You were not the architect of the financial fraud, the judge said, her voice softening slightly, but losing none of its steel. But you were a willing beneficiary. You spent the money. You enjoyed the lifestyle. And regarding the incident at the penthouse, you displayed a shocking disregard for the law. You treated a federal agent's home as your personal playground. You destroyed property. You attempted to leverage your family connections to evade consequences. Chloe looked up, tears streaming down her face. I didn't know, Your Honor, she whispered. I just wanted a place to stay. Ignorance is not a defense, the judge snapped. And entitlement is not a currency accepted in this court. You are an adult, Mrs. Evans. It is time you started paying your own bills. She looked down at her papers. On the charges of trespassing, destruction of government property, and aiding and abetting, I sentence you to 18 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation. You are also ordered to pay restitution for the damages to the penthouse totaling $12,000, 18 months. It wasn't a lifetime, but for a girl who had never spent a night without high-thread count sheets, it was a nightmare. Chloe let out a wail that tore through the courtroom. No, please, Mom. Mom, help me. My mother stood up screaming. You can't take her. She is a good girl. This is a mistake. The marshals moved in instantly. They grabbed Tyler and Chloe. There were no long goodbyes, no hugs. They were property of the state now. I watched as they were led away through the side door, the heavy chains around their waists clinking softly. Chloe looked back one last time. She looked at me. Her eyes were pleading, asking me to fix it, asking me to wake her up from this bad dream. I just watched. I did not smile. I did not frown. I simply witnessed. When the door closed behind them, a finality settled over the room. It was done. The cord was cut. I stood up and smoothed the front of my white suit. My parents were still standing there, clinging to each other, looking like two people who had survived a bombing but lost everything in the blast. My mother looked at me. Her eyes were red-rimmed and wild. Are you happy? She hissed at me across the aisle. Are you happy now, Jasmine? Your sister is in prison. Your family is destroyed. Is this what you wanted? I looked at her. I really looked at her. I saw the fear beneath the anger. I saw the realization that she had bet everything on the wrong child and lost. I didn't destroy this family. Mother, I said, my voice calm and low. I just stopped paying for the maintenance. I turned and walked up the aisle. I walked past the reporters who were waiting by the door. I walked past the sketch artist who was finishing a drawing of my sister's weeping face. I walked out into the hallway and down the marble steps. The sun was shining outside. The air was crisp and clean. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with oxygen that felt lighter somehow. I hailed a taxi and gave the driver the address of the airport. I had a flight to catch. I was going back to London, back to my life, back to the world I had built with my own hands. I checked my phone one last time. I deleted the family group chat. I deleted the contacts. I was an orphan now by choice and by circumstance. And as the taxi merged into the traffic, leaving the federal courthouse in the rearview mirror, I realized that for the first time in 35 years, I was not just successful. I was free. The flight back to London was the quietest journey of my life. I sat in seat 1A, sipping champagne and watching the Atlantic Ocean roll by beneath me. For years, whenever I traveled, my phone would be buzzing with demands. Chloe needed money for a dress. Tyler needed a loan for a car. My mother needed to guilt-trip me about missing a cousin's baby shower. But now my phone sat on the tray table silent and dark. I had changed my number before I even left Chicago. The only people who had the new digits were my lawyer, my banker, and the few friends I actually respected. When I landed, I did not go back to my apartment in the city. I went straight to the airport lounge and waited for my connection to Nice. I had been planning this move for 2 years, a secret escape hatch that I had built brick by brick with my bonuses and my dividends. While my family was busy spending money, they did not have to impress people they did not like. I was buying a distressed vineyard estate in the French countryside. It was a beautiful, crumbling limestone farmhouse, surrounded by 10 acres of grapes and lavender. It needed work, it needed love, and most importantly, it was 4,000 miles away from the nearest federal prison. I arrived at the villa just as the sun was setting. The air smelled of rosemary and warm earth. There were no sirens here. There were no screaming arguments. There was only the sound of cicadas and the wind rustling through the olive trees. I walked through the heavy wooden front door and dropped my keys on the table. For the first time in my life, I did not brace myself for a crisis. I did not wait for the other shoe to drop because I had thrown the shoes away. A few days later, a courier van crunched up the gravel driveway. The driver, a cheerful French man with a thick mustache, handed me a heavy wooden crate. It required a signature. I looked at the return address. It simply said, D. Vance, Chicago, Ill. I carried the crate into the kitchen and set it down on the island. It was nailed shut. I had to use a crowbar to pry the lid open. Inside, nestled in a bed of wood shavings, was a bottle. It was not just any bottle. It was a Pappy Van Winkle Family Reserve 23-year-old bourbon. The exact same vintage that Tyler had opened with a steak knife and wasted on his unrefined palate. Tucked next to the bottle was a handwritten note on heavy cream-colored cardstock. The handwriting was jagged and efficient, the script of a man who spent more time holding a gun than a pen. I picked it up and read it. Ms. Brooks, the Bureau seized your brother-in-law's assets yesterday. We found the rest of the ledger. He was laundering money for a syndicate out of Detroit. He was the big fish we had been hunting for 2 years, and we never would have caught him if he hadn't been arrogant enough to walk into my house. Thank you for the assist. I hope this replaces what was lost. Sorry about the rug. Best, Dante. I ran my thumb over the ink. Tyler wasn't just a scammer, he was a launderer for a syndicate. The realization hit me with a cold wave of clarity. If I had given in, if I had let them stay, if I had let Tyler use my Wi-Fi and my space, I could have been implicated. I could have been charged as an accessory. By saying no, by drawing that hard line in the sand, I hadn't just saved my property. I had saved my life. I took a crystal glass from the cupboard. I pulled the cork from the bottle. It came out with a satisfying pop that echoed in the high ceilings of the kitchen. I poured a generous measure. The amber liquid swirled in the glass, rich and heavy. I took a sip. It burned in the best way possible, warming my chest and settling my nerves. I walked out onto the terrace. The view was breathtaking. Rolling hills stretched out before me, painted in shades of violet and gold by the setting sun. I sat down in a wicker chair and closed my eyes. I thought about Chloe. Right now, she was likely sitting in a processing cell, trading her designer heels for shower slides. She was facing 18 months of a reality she was wholly unequipped to handle. I thought about my parents sitting in their rental apartment surrounded by boxes, wondering how their golden years had turned into dust. Society tells us that family is everything. We are taught from birth that blood is thicker than water, that we owe our kin our loyalty, our money, and our silence. We are told that the black sheep is the problem, that the one who leaves is the traitor. But they never tell you about the cost of staying. They never tell you that sometimes the family tree is rotten to the root, and the only way to save yourself is to take an axe to it. I had spent 35 years trying to buy their love. I had paid their debts. I had swallowed their insults. I had dimmed my own light so it wouldn't shine too brightly in their eyes. And what did it get me? Betrayal, scorn, a plot to steal from me in my own home. They called me cold. They called me heartless. But what they called coldness was actually boundaries. What they called heartlessness was actually self-preservation. I looked down at the glass in my hand. This bourbon cost $3,000. But the price I had paid to drink it in peace was far higher. It cost me my parents. It cost me my sister. It cost me the illusion of having a home to go back to for the holidays. I thought about Tyler sitting in a federal holding cell facing 12 years of confinement. 12 years. He would lose his 30s. He would lose his marriage. He would lose his arrogance. It was a steep price. But then I took a deep breath. I inhaled the scent of the lavender and the cooling air. I listened to the silence of my own house, a house that belonged to me and only me. I felt the absence of anxiety in my chest. For the first time in decades, I could breathe without feeling like there was a weight pressing down on my lungs. I realized then that grief and relief can live in the same house. I grieved the family I wished I had, but I was relieved to be free of the family I actually had. I had cut out the cancer. It was a painful surgery, and the scars would always be there, but the sickness was gone. I took another sip of the bourbon. It tasted like caramel and oak and victory. My mother had asked me if I was happy. At the time, I didn't answer her. But if she could ask me now, sitting here on this terrace under the first stars of the French evening, I would tell her the truth. Happiness is a fleeting emotion. What I have is something better. I have peace. I have security. I have a future that is entirely my own. The price of my freedom was 12 years of Tyler's life and 18 months of Chloe's. It was the destruction of my parents' finances and the end of our family name. I looked out at the horizon where the sun had finally disappeared, leaving behind a sky the color of a bruised plum. I swirled the glass one last time and raised it to the empty air. 12 years, I whispered to the night. I took a long, slow drink, savoring the burn. Honestly, I think I got a bargain. I set the glass down, picked up my book, and turned the page. The story of Jasmine Brooks, the scapegoat, was over. The story of Jasmine Brooks, the owner of her own destiny, had just begun. And let me tell you, the first chapter was going to be absolutely delicious. Jasmine's story is a powerful reminder that no is a complete sentence even to the people we share DNA with. For years, she believed that family meant endless sacrifice, but she learned that true family is built on mutual respect, not exploitation. And to you, listening to this story, remember this. I didn't tell you all of this to prove that I was right. I told it because this is a family story I wish I had understood much earlier in my life. What looks like strength on the outside can sometimes be fear in disguise. And what people later call dad revenge often begins as nothing more than a quiet decision to finally stop being used. When everything unraveled, I didn't feel powerful. I felt exposed. I asked God for clarity, not victory. I asked God to keep my heart from turning hard because bitterness is a prison that looks like justice. In this family story, the real turning point wasn't the arrest or the confrontation. It was the moment I realized that love without boundaries isn't love at all. Looking back, I see how long I stayed silent, how often I told myself patience was faith. But God never asked me to disappear so others could feel comfortable. If you're listening to this family story and you recognize yourself in it, please hear me clearly. Don't wait like I did. Don't confuse endurance with virtue. And don't let guilt dress itself up as loyalty. This wasn't about dad revenge in the way people imagine it. It wasn't about payback or humiliation. True dad revenge is choosing integrity when chaos invites cruelty. It's letting truth stand on its own and letting consequences fall where they may without your hands being dirty. That kind of dad revenge doesn't destroy your soul. It protects it. If I could give you one piece of advice, it would be this. Don't become me. Don't wait until the breaking point to speak. Say no earlier. Walk away sooner. Trust that God sees what others deny and that peace is worth more than approval. If this message resonated with you, leave a comment and share where you're watching from. Share this story with someone who might need it and consider subscribing if you want to hear more stories like this, stories that choose reflection over rage. Thank you sincerely for staying with me until the end. And a final note: upcoming stories may include fictionalized elements created for educational and reflective purposes. If that's not something you're comfortable with, feel free to stop here and choose content that better fits you.